welcome to Mazda Media, folks. It is Saturday, August 22nd, 2026, and it's a Saturday again, and it's noontime again, and it's Groundhog Day again. Just kidding. It's not Groundhog Day. That already happened this year. One quick second, folks. I'm going to adjust something quick. Adjust this fan here. There we go. It's a little more directly on me the way I like it. Good. I don't want to get too overheated here during this particular program today. So, guys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Mazda Media. Happy to be back. Happy to be doing a show, my first show since Monday night. We talked about the select board in North Andover, and then we talked about the Stoughton Police Department quite a bit. What's going on over there with Donna McNamara. And yes, so a lot more going on there. Today's show is going to be primarily focused on a two-part show today. So it's going to be about Lindsay Clancy and Karen Reed supporters, and then Turtleboy's deposition and Tim Bradl's motion that have been put out there this particular week. So that's what we're going to be talking about throughout today's show. It's been interesting out there. Of course, in the Lindsay Clancy world, this has been, as you guys have seen, a hot button topic, regardless of whether you have an opinion one way or the other. I mean, there's been some predominant ideologies out there, and there's also been alternative theories as to who actually murdered those children. This is a story, for the most part, I was not looking to follow for the majority of the weeks, but as with anything, as stories tend to get, out there in the news day in and day out, you go on your Twitter feed, you tune on the news at noon. This is what you're hearing about every single day. And after, I think, 2 weeks of this, my brain's kind of now all of a sudden starting to kind of get interested in this story. And what's really starting to grab my attention is really the comparisons between Karen Reed supporters, Lindsay Clancy supporters. In some cases, Karen Reed supporters are also Lindsay Clancy supporters. In some cases, they are not. In some cases, there's some ideological shifts that are going on out there that are suggesting one thing or else. So we're going to talk a lot about the supporters of Lindsay, Karen Reed supporters as well throughout the first half of the show. During the second half of the show, we're going to talk a bit about Aidan Carney, Turtleboy, and his deposition and how that went, and some of the craziness about that, and Mark Randazza, and some of the things that went on there. We're also going to be talking about Tim Bradl's motion, which I really have not read through thoroughly. I read about his tweets, but I'm going to dig in a little bit more into those motions and that as well to get caught up on that. Sometimes during my shows, I use them as catch-up sessions as well. Let's make sure my phone's charging here. It is good. Depleted more of my battery than I realize. And Rami is in the house. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well today. And yes, so we are live. Thank you. I appreciate it. Kelly AC says, Maz, I just want to say you're an amazing guy with all you do. I wish you all the good things in life. Speaking of doing things, we are working on a KY Maverick, Kelsey Fitzsimmons joint fundraiser for next week. So we're working on that right now. I've had some discussions with few people, Lauren, Common Sense Investigator, and Lori Mullen, attorney Lori Mullen, about this. So we're working on maybe next Sunday. I didn't check my emails this morning now to think about it. I emailed them back yesterday. I never checked it again. I should have done that, but it's been busy. Busy week. I've been very busy all week long. It's been nonstop. It's one of those things I wish I could do more shows, but a lot of times I'm just so caught up doing this, and that. It's, part of it's you're a career person, you have a job. Part of it's you got to make dinner every night. Part of it, you got to exercise every day. Part of it, it's summer, so it's very, very difficult to wear a lot of hats. I mean, I'd love to stream, 4 to 6 times a week, but it's just so much going on all the time. It's like I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that it's tough to, wear a lot of different hats in life and do a lot of things and get caught up and, get back to people on phone calls, text messages, emails, all that stuff. But doing the best I can. I'm just doing the best I can here, ladies and gentlemen. So appreciate it, Nanya. Good to see Romney. Rami is in the house. I always say Romney by mistake, but Rami, former governor of Massachusetts, was Romney. That's probably why. Hey, Mazza, Lynn says, hi, chat. Superstition Man says, morning, Mazza, and everyone from hot ass Arizona, 113 degrees today. My goodness gracious. Nancy Daly is in the house. None your business. None your business is in the house as well. And great to see people. I'm here for a few. I'm trying to convince my daughter to go kayaking with me. Well, kayaking is a lot of fun. I was just talking about canoeing. I haven't canoed in probably 18 years. I used to go canoeing with friends. I had a lot of friends that were into that kind of stuff. So say, hey, let's go canoeing. I'm like, okay, cool. So I used to do that a little bit here and there in the late first part of the first decade of this century. I'll say, Sarah, be creative. Looking like the bride from Kill Bill with the sword in her photo there. Good to see you. Hope everybody's doing good. Yes, it is afternoon on the East Coast. Morning, if you're in any other part of the United States right now. This is the only part of the United States presently where it is the afternoon. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we are here. We are live and ready to rock and roll. And we'll start to get into it. So, no, I never done that. I had some friends that did white water rafting, though. I guess they level them all up like category 4s or whatever they're called. They get like number codes and they would go up to New Hampshire and white water raft. I never went. I didn't feel like being on a raft that tips upside down and the next thing you know, you're trapped underneath water with rocks all over the place. Just wasn't really for me. So I ended up passing on that. If I am going to canoe or kayak or whatever, it's going to be on controlled waters. You know what I mean? It's like nothing too extreme. I don't feel like having a mishap injury. I try to avoid things that might have a high chance of. I'm not sure what Max is either. Yeah, Max, it's so fun. Mazza, it's so fun. Yeah, autocorrect will do that to you. Barb Clerk in the house. Good to see you. Yeah, I try to do things that are not too chaotic. You know, controlled environments like martial arts, running. I don't run anymore, but running, hiking. Not Wachusett. I've hiked numerous times, but not in a long time, actually, now that I think of it. But I used to go to Mount Wachusett year after year. I used to have a lot of friends, you know, back then that were into that kind of stuff, canoeing, hiking. Yeah, I still hike trails on my own, but I don't go to more extreme trails, like maybe Mount Wachusett, which was always fun. You know, you go all the way up and all the way down. You can feel it in your head afterwards. You feel a little bit lightheaded after a while. So, yeah, I don't run. I used to run, but you know, I feel like, you know, I put on so much weight over the years. I'm down to like 227 this week. I was 299 pounds 4 years ago. I was 299 pounds 4 years ago. I put on a lot of weight in my 30s. And then I had to adjust my diet, change some things about my life, and that worked. And I was able to lose a lot of weight. But I honestly, you know, running is good, but a lot of times, you know, if you're overweight, you know, and that's the thing about being overweight is the more weight you have on your body, the more pressure on your knees. So they don't really recommend running if you're overweight. Running is good if you're, you know, at a good weight, but the more body weight you have, the more pressure on your knees, meaning the higher chance that you can injure your knees and ankles while running. So I got away from that. I just did the walking. It's more of a controlled pace. And, you know, like for me, it's walking, it's spin bikes, and it's swimming. Those are usually my three methods of getting cardio. I used to play a lot of basketball. I haven't played in a lot. I've shot around, played pickup, but I haven't played in leagues in a long time. It's been longer than I care to admit. But I used to do leagues all the time. You know, the fall league, the winter league, the spring league. For men's leagues, I used to do all the time. Kind of got away from that after a while, but they were good times, but I got so busy with things I had to kind of drop out. Never got back into it. I always intended to go back, but never did. But yeah, cardio is good for you. The number one thing you can do is diet. You know, if you can control what you eat, you know, then exercising becomes like a bonus. That exercising just gets you to where you go quicker. But if you exercise primarily and don't diet, then your exercise will have a limited effect on your body sculpture and where you're looking to go. So it's always dieting should be the priority, you know, and you don't have to diet crazy. You just have to reduce. I always say to people this, the number one thing you can do is adjust what you drink, reducing alcohol, reducing or eliminating soda, reducing or eliminating juices, sugary drinks, all that stuff. If you can knock down what you drink, then everything else becomes a lot easier. If you're like me, we still drink a lot of soda, eat a lot of sandwiches. My body weight went like that. Once I got over like 25 years old, that metabolism was changing, and on came that body weight. So the number one thing you can do, the first adjustment you can make is what you drink. I would recommend eliminating sodas as much as you can. Gatorades, unless you absolutely need it, as much as you can. Sugary drinks, all that stuff. And then from that, it's carbs. It's breads, it's muffins, it's cakes, it's all that stuff. You can knock that all down as much as possible. That's 10 pounds real quick right off your body. It's a 10 pound. You see, I was 245 there on July 6th, made the adjustment to keto diet, bang, I was 227 in what? About 45 days, and it's amazing how fast that first 10 pounds comes right down. So, Lori Mullins in the house. We just talked about her recently here on the show at the beginning of the show a few minutes ago, about the fact that we're working on a fundraiser for KY Maverick and Kelsey Fitzsimmons. It's looking like it's going to be next Sunday, is what we're working. I got to check the emails again, Laura. I've been bad about checking the emails. Yeah, sugar is the worst. Carbs and sugar, that's what you want to be conscious of. You want to lower your sugar and carbs as much as possible. I agree. Walking the stairs will show you exactly where you're at. Mark Diller, Mark Diller is rude. Good to see you. All right, let's get into the show here. Nice warm-up session. Guys, great to see you all. Happy to have you here with me today. Happy to be doing a show. And we're ready to rock and roll. So let's get into it. I'll start off with an opening monologue here on Lindsay Clancy. And then we're going to start to transition into the Karen Reed supporters portion of this and start to draw a comparison. So, the Lindsay Clancy story is a chaotic story. It's a story of a woman that has murdered her children. The murder, for the most part, is not in... I'll answer this question. So I don't focus on the calories. I just focus on carbs and sugar. That's what I focus on the most. So I just keep the sugar, carbs and sugar low, and if you do that, then ketosis will take care of itself. So you try to keep the calories regulated, and then the calories are kind of like the least of the last thing that's even factored in. It's mostly carbs and sugar. Yeah. So again, the Lindsay Clancy matter here is not in dispute, as in terms of, well, it's mostly not in dispute in terms of who committed the murder. Lindsay Clancy, it is absolutely almost across the board. No problem about it, Lori. No problem. I want to take that question before I moved on. Lindsay Clancy, by my estimation and by most people's estimation, murdered her 3 children. In terms of other things out there, the husband is being mostly accused by a lot of people. I hate to almost go after content creators because I was a content creator focusing on Karen and some other people like Kelsey and Turtleboy, but Lindsay Clancy, in some avenues of the internet, is actually being stated as not having done it. They're saying that her husband did it, and I don't buy into that ideology at all. I feel like this is a trench war, and respect the fact that it is a trench war between competing ideologies of why Lindsay Clancy did this. In other words, I think most people would agree she did it. I just think that the big thing you're seeing out there, obviously, is how that people reach the determination of why she did it, or what led to her doing that. Postpartum depression is an argument. Medication is an argument. Other people argue that maybe it's just her being a psychotic killer that used this as a means to attempt to justify why she murdered her own kids. I personally buy into this as a incident that I highly question the medical portion of. That, for me, and I said this about Kelsey, as much as the postpartum argument stands, I still think other factors weigh in. And I'm not trying to draw too much of a comparison here between her and Kelsey, but with Kelsey, I still think that having your kids taken away, postpartum or not, is enough to draw a potential suicide reaction out of a person. I think in Kelsey's matter, postpartum just shot that up through the roof. I think with Lindsay Clancy, I buy into postpartum as an argument. However, I think for me, that's a secondary argument, and I'll explain why. I feel that the medications that are involved here and the medical professionals here are the people that truly need to be called into question. The reason why I state this is in no way, shape, or form to erode Lindsay Clancy as the murderer of her kids, or to minimize the fact that she more than likely was going through postpartum depression. However, I feel like the big argument here for me and many people is, and this is what and by the way, I want to be clear here. I've in no way, when I say any of this, made a conclusion as to every facet and every fabric of what led up to this. I am in a personal stance right now where I think that a serious investigation needs to be conducted at a medical level to determine what exact portion of this was led on by medical professionals. That is, for me, something I'd like to see further evaluated, something I'd like to see further dissected. I would like to know which of these prescriptions that she was prescribed had an impact on her, what efforts she made, which doctors she saw. And I have a limited understanding of this. I've only followed this case on a very limited basis, to be clear. So it won't be out of the realm of possibility that my chat is far more educated on this matter than I am. However, I feel like I've seen enough of the information out there to make an educated opinion, to have a theory, and to see things that I would like to see. I think that regardless of what happens to Lindsay Clancy, whether or not she is convicted, guilty or not guilty, whether or not she goes to prison, or whether or not she goes to a psych ward, regardless of all of that, I think that there needs to be a serious evaluation and look into, again, as stated, the medical portion of this. I think this needs to be evaluated. I think we need to understand in our country how prescription drugs, how medicines are affecting the psychology of human beings, in addition to human beings that are going through other mental facets, such as postpartum depression. Postpartum depression, as you know, can cause a series of mental thoughts in a woman. We have seen many women out there in pink shirts and online that firsthand have had given birth to children and can firsthand identify with what it's like to go through postpartum depression. I, being a man, never being a father up until this point in my life, have never had a firsthand experience of seeing my mother of my children go through this. However, we need to see into what's going on here and why there's a level of reactiveness. And while some will argue Lindsay may be using this, or her defense may be using this all as arguing a nonsensical argument, I ultimately feel like this is an argument that should be in play, because I do feel that there's a significant argument as to the amount of help Lindsay sought, the amount of medication listed by major media outlets that she was prescribed, and when she was prescribed them, and the effect on her mental health. I think for me, the focus is not necessarily on her mental state, but maybe the medicine-induced mental state. I also think that this particular case is a massive opportunity for the medical and medicine industry to take a deeper look and do serious research into what they are prescribing women that have postpartum depression. Now, I am more than sure that numerous women out there that have had postpartum depression, that have been prescribed medication, have not murdered their children, have not murdered their neighbor or their spouse, friends and family, or random people out on the street. It is clear to me that Lindsay Clancy appears to be more of an isolated incident, where Lindsay Clancy had postpartum depression, was prescribed medications, and in some way, shape, or form decided to, made a claim that she had heard voices and decided to murder her 3 children. I know this is an isolated incident. I'm more than sure that hundreds of women that have postpartum depression, if they were prescribed maybe 1 or 2 of those medications, probably would not react in that way. However, here we are. We have a situation now where this has happened. This is an absolute tragedy. And when tragedies happen, I think as a society, it's our best way to use these tragedies as a means to understand what happened and input preventative measures to prevent such incidences from happening again. And I think that's where this case comes to the forefront. And what it should be and what it deserves to be is a major launching point for clinical investigations into postpartum depression and the treatment of postpartum depression and the psychosis of postpartum depression in combination with the medications she was prescribed, in combination with the medications she may or may not have already been prescribed prior to that. And I think this is an important moment in our society. And I think the medical industry and all of them, medicine companies, all that, pharmaceutical companies, all of that, need to look into this and do a massive deep dive. We need to understand what happened here. And some may argue, look, well, she's just a murderer using this as an excuse. Well, if that is true, and many people are wrong, because I like to look into every argument, then fine. But I still think, regardless of whether or not Lindsay Clancy did have postpartum depression and the medicine caused this, or whether or not that's an absolute farce and the defense is lying, and as some people argue, to make an excuse for her, I think that ultimately this needs to be evaluated anyways. It needs to be researched anyways. It needs to be looked into anyways. So regardless of whether or not Lindsay in her defense are making a legitimate argument or an argument that could be picked apart as just making an excuse, I think that this needs to be researched anyways. I think we need to understand here why she was prescribed so many medications in a short-term level and what ultimately happened and why, and see if there's any ability to verify this. And I think that that's an important thing. What I hate to see online is the politicizing of this matter. I see that there's a lot of ideologies out there that want to take this issue and categorize it on one side of the political aisle or the other. I think the best way to approach a situation like this is to look at it as at face value. Simply, a woman murdered her children, and why is the question that we need to understand. And I think that is the most important thing we can do. I don't think that this needs to be categorized as people that support abortion, supporting a woman that murdered her children. I don't think that ideology is legitimate. And I don't think other ideologies should take place here. I think it should be stripped down to exactly what it is. As stated moments ago, a mother killed her 3 children, and we need to understand why. And if it was her naturally, we need to understand that. If it was postpartum, we need to understand that. And if it was medicine in combination with postpartum, we need to understand that. And I think that's the most important thing here, is to just strip through all the conversations, all the nonsense, all the debate, and strip it right down to the issue at hand. Why did this happen, and could it have been prevented? And what changes can we make to prevent something like this from potentially happening again? And I think that's the best way to look at this particular situation. Again, as I've stated on my show numerous times and everything, I like to take an analytical approach. I like to look at everything analytically on a case-by-case basis as I make my determination as to what happened. As far as it pertains to Lindsay Clancy being guilty or not guilty, I will be very clear in my thoughts on this. I don't know where the jury's going to go. I don't know if it's, my personal thoughts, as I posted about this week, is this is the path I think this should take. And I'm struggling with one portion of it. The portion I'm struggling with is it's not that I think this, it's just I can't figure out if guilty or not guilty is the right path. I just can't, in terms of the legality of it. Meaning, if she murdered her kids, then she murdered her kids and she's charged with murder, then wouldn't that be guilty? That's where I'm struggling. That's where I've struggled the most with this particular case is what I would say this. I think she's going to the psych ward. That is my thoughts right now. I think the right decision here is the mental institution or the psych ward. I think that's probably, I think that's what this is going to end up being, but I don't know. I I just think that I think this is a tough one. And I think that the issue here too, and someone said, actually, when I made my post, someone responded to me. I didn't have a chance to respond to them, but they made an argument that I liked a lot. They said, I think this is going to a hung jury, they said. And I actually find that very easy to believe. I find that very easy to believe. I really do. I think, and I see Rami here, I can't imagine 12 jurors are going to agree. I think this is going to be a mistrial. I have to say that's probably the highest percentage chance, because I think that this is a massive slippery slope. I'm looking at this case and I'm not trying to determine if she's guilty or not guilty in the sense that she murdered her children. I agree that she murdered her children. But what I'm stuck on and what I keep struggling with mentally is if she should be institutionalized for the rest of her life because of this and not in prison because of this, does this mean it should be a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict? I saw some of Candace Owens. She's a conservative speaker. She is I think me and her share the same medical opinion on this. And she said it should be not guilty. But I struggle with that because, again, if she murdered her, because I say this, if she murdered her kids and there's a murder charge, would they not have to declare her guilty of that? Wouldn't there? In other words, I'm guessing that the guilty verdict would be more, I would say mistrial, guilty, than not guilty, in that order are probably the likely orders. And then most probable orders. And then from there, I would have to say it would go to sentencing, obviously. And if it goes to sentencing, obviously, with a guilty verdict, I'm guessing it would have to go guilty, then psych ward. But if it's not guilty, then there's no psych ward matter, I wouldn't imagine. So it's just, like I said, it's this, as someone that's loosely followed this case and only had so much time to really quantify it all, it's very, it's very marshy waters. And I think for that very reason, like a lot of people are suggesting, this is why this may be a mistrial. Because I think there's a lot of things to get confused on here in terms of, well, what as I would say this. I think she needs to be, I know some people want to support her, I get it, but having to be institutionalized has to be a path here. Baker Raid, good to see you guys. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate it. Yeah. She stipulates to murder, but she pled not guilty. Right. That's what I'm talking about as well, that's what I mean. And I guess the reason for the not guilty is ultimately because essentially it would be the insanity path. It would be the psychosis path, where she's pleading not guilty due to the fact that she did not consciously murder her children. That postpartum depression in combination with the medicine led to this. So it's the insanity argument. It's the insanity argument. Good to see the Baker Raid people coming in. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too. They have to prove she did it. So like I said, it's a very slippery slope here. So I just, like I said, with the Karen Reed trial, I always felt very confident and not guilty. With Kelsey Fitzsimmons, I felt very confident with not guilty. They ended up dinging Karen on the DUIs. But with this case, it's just like, I can just see like 5 or 6 outcomes, and each of those outcomes potentially having, almost an equivalent percentage chance of happening. You know what I'm saying? We're guilty and not guilty. could have an equal percentage. A hung jury could have an equal percentage. You know, it could almost be 33% each all the way down. This is going to be an extremely interesting jury. And obviously, closing arguments, the defense is rested. Closing arguments are next week. And then from there, they're going to move on into jury deliberation. And it's going to be very interesting to see jury deliberation and the time frame that's going to take. I'm thinking this is probably going to take, I'm going to say, probably proportional. The only thing is I have to argue there's more evidence to look over in the Karen Reed trial. That's the only thing. There was more evidence in the Karen Reed trial to rip through. I'm going to say 2 to 3 days of jury deliberation is my estimate. That's what I'm going to estimate. My projection, my predictions, 2 to 3 days estimated on that. I think they could probably get through most of the material in a day. And I think, like Rami said as well, I think you're going to have a jury that's really split on it. I think you're going to have women that have had children that are going to have postpartum. Let's do it here. I'll put the poll on. Let's do it. Where's my poll? Poll. There we go. Let's do it. Guilty. Not guilty. This is the first time doing the poll from StreamYard itself. Mistrial. There we go. All right, let's see if this poll goes in. Here we go. All right, that poll's now in the chat. The Clancy verdict will be guilty, not guilty, or hung jury. Let's see if this vote, this should be appearing in the system here. Let's see if this is coming up. Let me know if you guys see that poll. Oh, start and show. Okay, I had to click that. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we are. Okay, there we go. So there's the right there. You have to type a 1, a 2, or a 3 in the chat. So you type a 1 for guilty, 2 for not guilty, or 3 for hung jury. That's how you vote. So one in the chat for guilty, 2 for not guilty, and 3 for hung jury. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. So 1, 2, or 3. Let's see if this poll is working here. And hung jury is coming up quick here. All right, we'll see the polls coming in. Couple 3s in the chat. 2's coming in. Not guilty. A lot of 2s, a lot of 3s. No 1s right now. And we're up to an early hung jury lead. So there you go. You're seeing that dominant. I like how StreamYard has this poll. I just learned about this the other day. So 1 for guilty, 2 for not guilty, 3 for hung jury in the chat comment section. And what you guys think. And not guilty is creeping up there. This is a lot better than having the YouTube poll now. This is great. KY Maverick says not guilty. Hung jury still holding out there, and there has a guilty vote cast right now. Nobody is saying guilty right now. I think that people believe in a couple things. Well, I would say this. I think not guilty due to insanity is a strong argument. I also feel like a hung jury is also a strong argument as well. So I think that I think there's a lot of argument there. Now, I still think there's a high potential for guilty. I still think the jury could come back with that. But someone wrote 3-2-3-3. But yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how this pans out here in terms of what the jury decides. But in our collective world, not guilty. Well, I think maybe not guilty with insanity. You know, the insanity argument, the psychosis argument is strong. I think the hung jury is very strong. I think you might have some competing. You might have at least 4 jurors that are on opposite sides of the spectrum on this thing, and decide that they're like, hell, you know, we're not coming off where we stand on this. You know, you might have people like, that woman murdered her kid. She murdered her kid. She's guilty. I don't care what she pled. She's guilty. That's it. She murdered her kid. She's done. Guilty. You know, you might have a juror like that. Then you might have other jurors that are like, look, I've been, you know, you might have a woman on the jury, a couple women on the jury. Look, I've had kids. I've gone through postpartum depression. I've been through you know, I've been watching her in court. I know what it's like to go through the psychological shifts with postpartum depression. I know what it's like to be medicated. And, you know, this is something that actually could happen. It's actually the medicine, you know, the pharmaceuticals' fault. It's the pharmaceutical companies. It's the doctor's fault. You know, you could have a lot of arguments like that. Not guilty and hung jury right now are almost getting, actually, you know what? That's a damn good point. That's a damn good point right there, Lori. That's a damn good point. I almost wonder if it was in the judge's hands, would this be better off in the judge's hands? I would have to say that's a very strong argument. Yeah, so it's 12 women and 6 men. So, and then it comes down to jury selection. So you pretty much figure 2/3 of that jury could potentially be, 2/3 are presently women, but 2/3 of that, once it gets reduced down to the 12, could still potentially be women as well. I don't imagine all, it'd have to be, say, 4 of the 6 men would have to be selected. So if she gets a predominantly female, it's actually amazing to me that the prosecution allowed so many women on this when you think about it. Because you figure that, if anything, women, between men and women, women having, the understanding of this matter far more than us men, you'd have to imagine the prosecution would have made sure that that gender-based thing would be more even. But someone says this, alternatively, women can be judgy. Someone says, Miss Press says women could be judgy. So you might, again, to that argument, you might have women that are more understanding, but you might also have women that have had kids and feel like this argument doesn't fly with them. So that's again, we look at on this show, the way I think as well, I like to look at multiple alternative theories, look at things from different ways, different viewpoints, different understandings. So that's a great point. You might have women that have had kids that say, look, one woman might be in that jury room saying, hey, look, I'm a mother of 2 to 4 kids. I've had postpartum multiple times. I've been medicated for it. I never once had a decision or never thought to act like this. And I can't relate to her. So maybe that might be, to Miss Chris's point, that could be in play. We'll see. Tracy V's in the house. Couple of nurses in the pool. That would be important. That would be important if they might be more favorable towards her. We'll see. Diane Gallagher says, good to see you. Not guilty due to insanity puts the responsibility solely on the individual. In this case, Lindsay sought treatment and instead of receiving therapy, she was provided a suitcase of medicines. That's true. That's true. And I heard one argument that maybe a weekend away from her kids may have sufficed as well. But yeah, having registered nurses, for example, on that jury, they might be people that have had a wealth of experience. If they work in that particular venue that deals with this, they would definitely, probably, in my opinion, have a high percentage chance of having an ideology that would look at this more sympathetically and compassionately. They might even say, hey, look, I've seen people prescribe all kinds of stuff. The way they prescribe people around here is insane. It's amazing this shit don't happen more. You know what I mean? You might have someone with that kind of attitude. So I think, like I said, I think the jury and their approach to this really is going to supersede everything, folks. I agree here. And we don't have a single guilty vote in. 1 for guilty, 2 in the chat for not guilty, 3 for hung jury. Thank you it was Sarah B. Creative that recommended the poll. Thank you for having us do this poll. It doesn't show how many people voted, though. That's one thing I don't like. But we've seen many people vote. Actually, it does. Here it is. It's in my back system here. 18 people said not guilty, 21 people said hung jury, and 0 people have said guilty, is what we're coming in. But like I said, it's a wild case. And I think honestly, look, I think there's a lot of competing ways to look at this thing. I think that with the Karen Reed case, you saw a lot of people like Karen's innocent. You saw maybe a 5 to 15% margin of people that think Karen Reed's guilty, right? With this, I mean, look at the poll right here. Here's the thing. I feel like the people that are voting not guilty and hung jury in this chat, based on what I've seen, are basically people that understand Lindsay Clancy. I think they're people that are empathetic to the fact that, well, Lindsay Clancy did murder her kids. They understand what led up to it from a postpartum and medicine standpoint. And that ultimately, I think the argument here from our chat, our show here today, is that it's going to come down to a verdict of, say, not guilty, the insanity plea is bought, insanity argument's bought, or hung jury as in, well, we believe that maybe the jury, to the most part, agrees with her or believes in her argument, but it's that slippery slope. It's that jury that's very, so I'd say 2 and 3 are almost, based on what I've seen in our chat, I think ideologically there's shared sentiments about this matter. But I think that from the judicial standpoint, which is what this poll represents, I think that if you have that ideology, you're really going to go into column 2 or column 3 here in terms of what you, row 2 or row 3 here, in terms of what you think is going to happen. Meaning, okay, well, many of us may sympathize with what led up to it and understand there's more to this picture. However, from a legal standpoint, from a courtroom standpoint, from a jury standpoint, how is this really going to factor out here? How is this really going to end? Not guilty or hung jury is the predominant theory. And I think these are strong votes. I still think there's more, even despite our poll, I think there's a higher, I'd say that the guilty verdict is more in play here than I think we're voting. But I might have to say hung jury myself. I may have to say hung jury myself, quite honestly. I think it's going to be very tough for 12 people to just agree on this matter. You're talking about child murder here, and then it's, well, do you buy it or don't you buy it, right? I think that's a good conversational piece here, is I think that the first hump, the first hill for that jury to conquer is going to be, okay, of the people that are in this jury room right now deliberating, which of you think she did it? Excuse me. Well, obviously everyone in the room is probably going to think she did it. For the most part, I don't think they're going to be sitting there theorizing, well, she didn't do it. Maybe you might have one. But I think of those people, the first argument is going to be, look, do you buy the psychosis argument or not? Everyone to the left or the right, if you think her insanity argument from a medical standpoint or a medication standpoint or a postpartum standpoint, do you think this or that? Go to this side of the room or that side of the room, or raise your hand, right? I think that's the first. I mean, if I'm in a jury, if I'm the jury foreman, I think that's the first thing I'm going to ask. I'm going to be like, of everybody in this room right now, do you buy into the insanity argument, the psychotic argument, the medicine argument, the postpartum argument? And let's just have people go to each side of the room. Let's start from there. Okay, let's start from there. Do we buy into this? And I'd have to imagine, out of a room of 12 people, at least 4 people are going to be on one side of the room or the other, minimum. I think at least 4. That's just my guess. I'm just spitballing numbers here. But I think at least 4 people out of that 12 are probably going to not buy that argument. 8 of them, more than likely, probably will, I hope, because I think this is a mental health issue. And I think the jury needs to work from there. But I think that's the first hill they need to climb as a jury, is to identify, hey, look, do you buy into the insanity argument here, or the psychosis argument here, the medicine, the postpartum, whatever? Do you buy into this or not? Let's work from there. And from that point, they're going to have to say, okay, now we know exactly where people are. Maybe some people might even be uncertain. You might have people that are uncertain. From there, I think they work from there. That's my how I would do it if I were a jury foreman. So let's see what people are thinking here in this room. Then from there, I think you start to have an argument about why everybody looks at this case the way they do. I think you might have a woman or two in that room that would say, hey, look, firsthand, a woman might say, I've given birth to children. I've had postpartum depression. I've been medicated for it. I've been through this. I can look, they might even say, look, I've never thought about killing my kids, but I can identify with the fact that, you feel like you're different. You feel like you can be altered. You can feel like, suicidal potential. You might have someone argue something like that, but I think that's the number one thing they could do is, split that jury room up right away, whether you buy into the psychosis argument or not, and then work from there. Then go over the evidence from there and then look through it and then continue to make arguments as to why this should be one argument or the other. in terms of, okay, if postpartum factored in, let's have a debate about that. Let's go into it right now. Someone like myself, little to no knowledge of postpartum. It was the Kelsey Fitzsimmons case that got me educated on it. You know what I mean? But I feel like that's where they should start. One in the chat for guilty, 2 in the chat for not guilty, 3 in the chat for hung jury. Scott McGinnis is here as well. Good afternoon. Lori Mullins with us as well. Good afternoon. Andrea Stewie's with us. Good afternoon. Everybody else, good afternoon as well. Love you all. Good to see you. Yeah, I know. Would they retry? It's a great argument. I don't even know where to start with that. I don't know what they would think. I don't even know what to think here. But yeah, I think there's a high chance for a hung jury, because I still think that, I think when we try to identify a jury and how they think, I think sometimes when we think for ourselves, like, for example, if we as individuals were on that jury, I think we always have to remember that our perspective, our opinion, our perception of this matter is limited to, say, for example, one person, right? So there's always a chance that on every jury, there's probably one person just like us, right? There's probably one person with an exact ideology similar to that of yourself or myself, right? There'll probably be that one person. There will be, I almost guarantee there will be the woman on that jury that has had postpartum and has been on the medications and can completely identify with Lindsay. And I can almost guarantee there'll be, speaking for men, there'll be one guy at least on that jury that will be like, I know nothing about postpartum. I've never been married. I never had a wife. I've never been a father. I don't know about postpartum. I don't use prescription medications, or if I do, I've never had any bad experiences. I don't know what any of this is about. I just know she killed her kids, and I'm here to say guilty. You might have someone like that, so we don't, it's the sampling of size of who exactly ideologically is going to be on that jury and what they're going to say. And I think for that matter, as we're seeing here with our poll, I think the hung jury argument is 58% of the vote right now. And I think that's really where a lot of people see this heading. And I think that there's going to be, and I think too, the factor here is that 3 kids were murdered. And I think looking at people on that jury that might not buy the psychosis argument, that would buy into the argument that, she killed her kids and she should go to jail the rest of her life. Screw her. She's evil. There's any people that think that, and I don't know if those people, because the people that are going to say she murdered her kids, bottom line, I don't want to hear any arguments. It is what it is. She should go to jail the rest of her life, right? Or prison the rest of her life. You might have those people. And for that reason, if you have at least 2 or 3 people like that on that jury, and say you have 2 or 3 people on that jury that, you might even have a guy. Oh, my wife had postpartum depression, and we've had 2 kids, and they gave her all kinds of medications. And my wife, I didn't recognize her for the longest time. And then one day she kind of came back to normal. You might have a guy that can relate, because he's had a wife or a girlfriend or a lady in his life that he had a kid with, and he can identify. So I think that here's the thing. I think you're going to have people on that jury like, she murdered her kids. She's guilty. You're not going to change me. You're not going to sway me. I'm not buying it. I don't care what medications. I don't care about what you're saying. She's guilty. She murdered her kids. Bottom line. You're going to have other people arguing for postpartum, arguing for the psychosis argument, saying, look, this can happen, that can happen, this can happen. I think there's a high chance neither one of the people of those ideologies are going to move to the center. And even if some of them do move, I'll say this right now. I don't see a chance that people that buy into postpartum depression have felt firsthand postpartum depression in any way, shape, or form coming down from their hill to say, okay, fine, let's go with the guilty. I don't see those people doing it. And the people that are more strong-minded say, for example, about the fact that she killed her kids. Those are the facts. I don't want to hear any of the arguments. She's a murderer. Bottom line, I don't really see those people moving either. And I think you're going to have no less than probably 4 people like that are, I'm talking strong-minded about it. Like out to the sides of the room with that ideology. I think that, and that's why I think you're seeing here with this poll that hung jury, vote is so high right now, because I think that people can, and I think not guilty and guilty are very much in play here, but I think that there's a high percentage chance for a hung jury as well, because I think, like we've explained two strong ideologies that differ. I think that if you have people in the room that think that way, one way or the other, and I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong, I'm just talking about the psychology of it from a jury perspective, I don't think that they're going to move. And I think that that's, like I said, I think we got it right. That hung jury. What did I say earlier? Hung jury, then not guilty, then guilty. Is that how I ordered it? About 20 minutes ago on this show, I think that's how I ordered it. I might have ordered it. I can't remember. Maybe I can't remember what the heck I said now. But yeah, I think we got the order right here. Hung jury, then not guilty, then guilty in terms of probability of what the verdict is. I still, again, I mean, you don't often see people murder their own children, and when you do, it's very few and far between. I remember that woman. What was that woman there? I think she put her kids in the car and she sent the car into the water way back when. If someone might remember that story. You do see that happen. And it's extremely, like child murder to me it's worse than standard murder of an adult, because it is children. It is shit I don't like to talk about, quite honestly. That's why I don't really, Andrea Yates, they're saying, I don't really like to talk about these subjects all that much, because I think like the child murder aspect of it's always hard. Like murder is always bad, don't get me wrong, but it's worse when it's kids. It's it's far worse when it's children that are involved. And that's, I think in our society, I was watching 9/11 happen 25 years ago, which is hard to believe. In a couple of weeks, it's going to be 25 years. That was, probably the worst day of all time in our lifetimes. And, it's horrible, when anybody gets murdered, it's just a terrible thing. And you hate to see it, we've seen lots of shootings. We've seen what happened in the Boston Marathon bombing. And when the Boston Marathon bombing happened, I'm sorry, I'm looking down here, but I'm just really in deep thought. It was the murder of the kid, Martin Richard, that bothered me the most. It was his sister getting his foot blown off that bothered me the most of all the people. Even though everything was bad, it was harder to see it happen to kids. Because I think in our world, I think we can understand sometimes that horrible things happen, right? Like murders happen, terrorism happens, war, Pearl Harbor, terrorist attacks, wars. Like I think we all understand in our lives that these horrible things can happen, and it's horrible when they do. But I think when it happens to kids, it's an extra punch in the face. It's an extra, like it bothers me just a little bit more. You know what I mean? And when the Boston Marathon happened, that's how I kind of felt. It was like, while every death was horrible, while every person that was, had their bodies permanently destroyed and are still walking today with impairment, it bothered me just a little bit more about Martin Richard dying that day. It bothered me just a little bit more about his sister getting her leg blown off, or foot blown off. And I think it's like I said, well, things are terrible and bad. I just think the child aspect of it just bothers me more. It's like when mass shootings happen and then Sandy Hook happens, and it's like, well, shootings always, affect us all the same way. But when it's kids, it's like, I think we want to live I think we live in a world where we understand where people die, and it can happen in a multitude of scenarios. Whether terrorism, shooting, bombings, wars, accidents, whatever. I think we all understand that. But I think with kids, there's a level of innocence. There's a level of sacredness there. And, I think we can all understand from time to time, it's just fucking tough. That's just what I want to say. It's just a tough situation to go through, to see happen. These kids are defenseless. They depend on other people, to help them out. They can't defend themselves, things like that. And it's tough. It's just tough to understand. Like at the end of the day, 3 kids were murdered, which is why I think that comments online suggesting Karen Reed supporters who support Lindsay Clancy support children being murdered in a sense. I think that's why that kind of set me off the other day. A person said about me online, Media is big mad. And yeah, I mean, I am big mad because your comment really was an irritant to me. And I read that comment online. You know, the Karen Reed people are now supporting the Lindsay Clancy person. And look, I said this in my post. I'm going to read it verbatim here. You know, and I think this is a post I really kind of thumbed over. I really took some time on this post. When the heck did I write this? A day or two ago? So, 1 second. So we have this person here online. They're probably watching. They're more than certainly watching this show right now. And they're welcome to watch this show, and they're welcome to ridicule me later. That's perfectly fine. I welcome independent thought, independent opinion. So this person on X, who we're going to talk about here, is named Earl. What's her name here? Earl Pink Crying Lady Gray. So this woman here, let's move this poll. There we go. All right, this woman here on X. This is the Noodle Mom lady. So she makes a comment and she goes, I'm actually right there. There I am. I even made this. I remember taking this photo. This was 2024. This was after, I think this was the day of the mistrial. This was 2024, and this was the day of the mistrial, was what this was. We took a big group photo together afterwards. That's right. Yep. Cloudy day. Everybody, you know, Scott McGinnis has got his raincoat on there, rain thing on there. Yeah, it was rain. It was a downpour that day. Yeah. So this was kind of, yeah. So she said, I'm big mad on X. And yeah, she's right. I am big mad. Yeah. Who's the handsome man? Thank you. Yeah. So this post was made, and this Cheech is here. Cheech is here. Chrissy Mello, Scott McGinnis, and people I recognize. Other people here, Erica, Rita, Allison, a couple other people. This guy was a good guy here. I remember this couple up front. They're really nice, wonderful people. A lot of good people. All good people here. So they said first they cheered for a drunk driver who killed her boyfriend. Right. So basically now it's like this kind of the central ideology of this is to go after Karen Reed supporters is what this is. It's taking a situation and now trying to put it on Karen Reed supporters. So first they cheered for a drunk driver who killed her boyfriend. Then it goes to Lindsay Clancy. It shows all the pink shirts out here. None of these people I even recognize, by the way. Now they're cheering for a woman who killed her 3 kids. So the ideology here is really what I had an issue with, and is really what I took issue with, is this argument that definitively stating Karen Reed murdered John O'Keefe, which has not been proven. And then in turn, turning around and saying, now they're cheering for a woman who killed her 3 kids. But that ideologically here, that argument that's being made is, all of these people are cheering for this woman specifically because she murdered her children, which is a lie, which is not a lot of these people have been interviewed and they'll tell you they're not here cheering for a woman who murdered her child. They're there because they believe in the postpartum argument. They believe in the psychosis argument. They believe in the medicine argument. So that's what kind of got me going here in terms of speaking out about this meme. I happened to come across it. I don't even recall how I came across it, but yes, I did take issue with it. So I made a post about this, which we're going to read through here. It summarizes my opinions. It took me a while to write this because I kept rewriting it and editing it. I must have edited this post about 4 times because I wanted to make sure this post came off exactly how I wanted to state it. So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Yep, we got it. We're good. Perfect. All right. So the latest attack on supporters of Karen Read comes in the form of a meme outrageously claiming that her supporters support the murdering of children. See that right off the bat, I attack in my argument here exactly what set me off, exactly what I had an issue with about this post by Noodle Mom. It's an attack on Karen Read supporters. That much is clear. It starts right off with an attack. And then it makes it seem like they're supporting children being murdered. And I just think that overall, that is a horrible take to have. I think, again, it's a lowball attack on Karen Read supporters and trying to tear them down. Like, look, Karen Read supporters are monsters. People that are Karen Read supporters that also support Lindsay Clancy are terrible, horrible people that support the murdering of children. I think that's just such a look, I would say this. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't agree with people that think Karen Read is guilty. However, I do respect people's right to believe that Karen Read is guilty, and I do suggest that they do so on an analytical and grounded basis, meaning I think Karen Read's guilty. They could say, I think Karen Read is guilty. That's my argument, and so forth and so on, right? And I say, well, I think Karen Read is not guilty, so forth and so on. And that's one of the things I thought kind of lacked, in our contestment with anti-Karen Read people, was that lack of ability to have a sit-down conversation in a civil manner and just say, I think Karen Read did or did not do it. Here is why I make that argument, and respect that other person's the right to have that opinion. Instead, it kind of got very mudslinging out there, and that's what you see. It's always very mudslinging. It's Karen Read supporters supported Karen Read murdering a cop. That's not true. Karen Read supporters believe that Karen Read didn't kill John O'Keefe and support her because they believe that she was framed and John O'Keefe's murder was covered up. I take exception to people saying we're Karen Read supporters who support the murdering of a cop. That much has always set me off and still does to this day. It's the same thing about people that support Lindsay Clancy. I don't truly believe that these people out there wearing pink shirts are, in fact, people that support the murdering of children. And I think that this whole post by this individual is a lowball attack, and it's a disservice to the ideological belief system of Karen Read supporters as well as Lindsay Clancy supporters. And I think that's one of the biggest fights right now that is coming out of this whole thing, is the argument that, I think it did, in fact, Kara. I did, in fact, think that's where it comes from. I have a post about that, but I don't have the full article. But I don't like these attacks because this is misleading on why Karen Read support. I've never met a Karen Read supporter. I've never met a Karen Read supporter, and I've known a lot of Karen Read supporters, okay, that have ever sat there and said, you know what? You want to know why I really believe in Karen Read? I'm here supporting you. I never heard anybody make the comment, quote unquote, that they support Karen Read because they believe she murdered John O'Keefe. I've never met a single Karen Read supporter in my life that said they support Karen Read because they believe in their mind and heart that Karen Read murdered John O'Keefe. Every single Karen Read supporter I've ever met has said they believe Karen Read did not murder John O'Keefe, did not hit him, did not kill him. And this was a battle against a cover-up, against a frame job. And so, again, I don't like that ideology. And I see the same thing happening with supporters of Lindsay Clancy. They're being basically categorized as people that are out there like, they're all out there supporting, they're supporting her because she murdered her kids. No, they're not. You talk to any of them, and if you interviewed every single one of them, you're going to hear probably something more along the lines of, we do understand that this happened. We don't, I'm sure most of them might say, we don't argue the fact that this happened. We don't argue the fact of what happened from a physical standpoint, that this murder happened, that these children were murdered. We don't in any way, shape, or form ignore the fact that this is a tragedy. However, we're here because we're here in the argument of mental health, psychosis, the argument that Medicine may have played a part in conjunction with postpartum depression. So that's really the ideology. So these kind of posts, I think, really strip away the belief system of the people that are donning pink shirts, which is why this comparison was why this post was made. The meme begins with an unproven claim that Karen Read murdered John O'Keefe. Karen Read was acquitted in 2025. In the comments section, I got a response saying, well, there's no proof to the contrary, right? There's no proof that she didn't do it. Well, again, there's no proof that Karen Read did it, and she was acquitted as a result of that. Bottom line. The supporters of Karen Read, who also happen to support Lindsay Clancy, predominantly do so on the condition of understanding postpartum depression and the questionable prescribing of medications. You see, people are always thinking more deeply. They're never looking at things at face value. They're always thinking about things at a higher level. How about giving this person no attention? How about, yeah, you're right, but here's actually, you know what? I have a good answer to this. Actually, you know what? I have a great answer for this. I'll tell you why. So, the argument here from another normal mom, who's, I'm more than sure, a great person, and I'm in no way angry at this post, but I think this brings a good question. I think can have a good answer. So, how about giving this person no attention is the argument? Yes, you're right. This person deserves no attention. However, I feel that regardless of who is making this argument, that this argument is still out there. It's almost like this. It's almost like, for a moment, set aside the person who said it and look at the argument. The fact is that this argument is being made online, right? So regardless of whether or not we give this person attention or not, these are still arguments that are being made online. So I think that's why I think, like, I agree that we shouldn't give this person attention. However, I think that the ideology behind it is being pushed around online quite a bit. And I think that maybe we should push back. Those are kind of my thoughts on it. So I just want to give you an answer to your question, because I think you make a strong argument. And quite honestly, to your point, usually I do. Usually I do. Usually I will typically, just like you're suggesting, ignore that person, not give them any attention. Absolutely. No question about it. But I think that the argument here needs to be confronted. That's how I personally feel about this, which is why I usually never really ever see me talk on my show about commenters online or things like this online. However, I feel like in this particular situation, this is an ideology that needs to be addressed, and that's why I'm talking about it. So I just want to give you a good answer to that. Good comment. A conversation enhanced the conversation here. So it's worth talking about. So again, the supporters of Karen Read who happen to support Clancy predominantly do so on the condition of understanding postpartum depression and the questionable prescribing of medications. Those supporters understand that this all could have been avoided if Clancy was properly diagnosed and treated, right? So again, that's a big thing. There's a lot of questions about the diagnosis here. There's a lot of questions about the treatment here. And if that's the case, then we need to understand what happened there, right? So again, these supporters understand this all could have been avoided if Clancy was properly diagnosed and treated. That's a big thing. And that's one of the big arguments here is why, what could have been done differently? And if something could have been done differently, what could have changed? They understand that this is an opportunity to raise awareness to prevent terrible tragedies like this from happening again in the future, right? Because again, they're not out there supporting the murdering of children. They are out there trying to raise awareness for matters like this to prevent such situations from ever happening again. You see things that have happened, drastic decisions that have been made by women that have been in postpartum depression and fought through these matters and have struggled through these matters, right? And have made decisions or had thoughts. These are things that I think these women are out there fighting for to bring change about. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's a good argument, right? An essential belief is that the medical system failed her and her children, right? Even on top of that, a bigger argument is, what about the medical system's responsibility? What about the doctor's standpoint? What about how she was prescribed? Should she have been prescribed this many medications? What could have been done differently? So those are arguments they're making. The meme below is absolutely sickening in its attempt to justify an anti-Free Karen Reed ideology by suggesting her supporters would ever support the murder of children, right? Again, this is an attempt to make it look like, these Karen Reed supporters are a-holes. They've been out there supporting a woman who murdered a cop, and now they're supporting a woman that murdered her kids. These are horrible, evil, sinister people, right? That's kind of the ideology behind this post. All right. It is the same short-minded thinking that prevents anti-Karen Reed minded people from seeing the bigger picture, that Karen Reed was always innocent, right? Because again, you have to look past things. We have to fully understand how things come to be. And to another, where's she? Where is she? Can't find it. Here. Another normal mom. I hope that you're still watching our show. I hope that you tune in. I hope you don't feel like I attacked you with my response. I hope that you saw my response as a quantified response to you. And I hope that you'll continue to tune in. And I hope you'll comment again, because we love having everybody here. But yes, that's kind of, I think, the argument there, is, again, there's always more to it. And I don't think that Karen Reed supporters or Lindsay Clancy murderers should be written off and have their argument written off as being people that support murderers or murder in any way, shape, or form. Another normal mom is still here. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And you added to the conversation. I like the alternative approach sometimes too, where we suggest something different than what the host is talking about, and we talk about that. Thank you. All right, so we'll continue here. This was the post here that was, I think it was Unfiltered Thoughts on X posted about this, and I am going to continue forward here with this particular post that surfaced. This was the post from, I think this was NBC that posted this. This is essentially a post about the pink shirts, and talking about the fact that these women are out there. When you look at this image, what does it remind you of, right? What does it remind you of? It reminds you of Karen Reed supporters, right? 1 year later, 2 years later, Karen Reed. Scott McGinnis says, I disagreed with the pink standout, but my personal view, those whom are participated have their freedom of speech, but free speech is never free. Right, exactly. Like, and I'll share with you, Scott, that I personally, this is just my particular viewpoint. You're not going to see me out there for this one. This is just one I'm not standing out for. This is a matter of, I just think, to me, like, just because of the child murder aspect of it, it's something I'm just really avoiding from a personal standpoint. And that is in no way, shape, or form to deny or disparage their right, in agreement with your statement as well. Anybody's right to go out there and ever stand for what they want to stand for, and share the ideology that they wish to share. So again, this is just something I wouldn't stand out for. But again, everybody has the right to stand out for this and have their views heard, and all of that. And again, I think that there is some kind of back and forth online, even from Karen Reed. Like, not every Karen Reed supporter shares an opinion on this, right? There's quite a bit of change. I've seen many Karen Reed supporters kind of here and there on this whole thing as well. In terms of, do they agree with the people standing out? Do they disagree? Do they think they're holding themselves well? Do they not? There's been a lot of back and forth online as well about that. No question about it. But that's we'll move forward here to the central point here. This is a argument that was made. Let me just zoom in this way. This is much better. There we go. This is organized by the same group that organized a rally outside the Norfolk Superior Courthouse in Dedham during both of the Karen Reed's murder trials. That, to my understanding, is absolutely false. I don't recall that ever being stated outright, that this was the Karen Reed. It's almost like, oh, the Karen Reed movement, they're back at it again. Now, look, there's probably a lot of people that are Karen Reed supporters that are out there for this one, but there's probably a lot of Karen Reed supporters that didn't come out. So, like I said, someone said to me online today, they were countering my post, and they said, kind of challenged my thought process in the category. Both supporters of both groups being categorized as the same thing. And like, well, it has some common denominators. Yeah, you're right. It does. It does have, there's certainly people that are Karen Read supporters that are out there for this. There are certainly people that are Karen Read supporters. I don't even know what this post even means. I don't even know what this post even means. Maz looks a little pale. Maybe. Probably quaking in fear from Jeffsky's threats. I don't know who the heck that is. Sorry. Yeah, but I'm not sure if I look more pale because I haven't been getting as much sun the past 2 weeks as I have during the summer. That's what caught my attention. But yes, I think that you're not going to see every Karen Read supporter out there. And I don't like, let me restart. I'm going to restart this point. The person said to me kind of that it's not far-fetched for Karen Read supporters to be out there. It's not far-fetched. It's not hard to believe. To a point, yes, because there are some common denominator people out there, right? People that were out there for both. But I think in the sense to categorize this as, Karen Read people, Lindsay Clancy people is all just an essential group of people that just go out for every single thing, regardless of circumstance or whatever. I don't like the category that those groups being categorized into one like this. I don't like that argument. I don't like that. Oh, yep, it's the Karen Read supporters again. There they go. Because I think it takes away from Karen Read supporters, but I also think it takes away from Lindsay Clancy supporters. You have different people out there, potentially. So maybe some of the same people out there, potentially. But it's not the same group that organized these rallies at least not that I'm aware of. And it just seems like, oh, there they are. These people are out there again, and all this stuff. And it's just like, no, I don't like that all of us being placed in the same category, because I think that, like I said, getting back to the other meme we were looking at, it was, we support cop killers. They say we support Lindsay. I don't even know if I'm even a Lindsay Clancy supporter, to be honest with you. I don't think so. I would say I'm more of a Lindsay Clancy observer who is observationally of the belief that postpartum in medicine more than likely contributed to her decision to murder her kids. That's probably, I wouldn't say I'm a supporter of her. I would just say that I can essentially observe her situation, and I'm attempting to quantify her situation that maybe she didn't do it consciously. Another normal mom. Thank you so much. A lot of us didn't know injustice till free Karen Read. It's a great point. She says here that, a lot of people, day in and day out, whether in the state or other states, sometimes, we live our lives day in and day out, and we don't think about certain things like this. And it's not till sometimes situations like Bruce Wayne said, in Batman Begins, sometimes it takes big things to wake people up out of apathy. And it doesn't mean people are naturally apathetic in a sense that they don't want to be open-minded. It just means that sometimes we're not consciously aware of what's going on around us as much as we may realize until certain situations happen that reveal that. I think back to the Canton people that were free Karen Read that went to their select board and figured they could have a fair argument, and then started to realize it was going to be a lot harder than they realized to get through to those people, and eventually voted them all out. So that's a great point. And thank you, Another Normal Mom. And Another Normal Mom had a counter statement to me earlier in the show. And, I think that one of the great things I can do, or one of the best things I can do as a host, is answer that question, have a conversation with another normal mom who offered a different opinion, and discuss that a little bit. I think that was a great comment and a great response by me, in my opinion, at least. And I like to see, that's kind of how I like to manage my shows, is to, if someone has a different view on something, or a slightly different view, like, don't give this person attention, which is a great argument. We really shouldn't. She's right. But I felt like just the ideology of that comment online and that meme was just like, I got to address this one. You know what I mean? But again, thank you, Another Normal Mom, for your super chat, as well as your commentary in the chat, as well as everybody's comments in today's chat as well. Looking back at the poll here, is we have 1%, 2% for not, 2% for guilty. I'm sorry, 2% say guilty, 42% say not guilty, and hung jury is hanging at the top here, 56%. One vote for guilty, 20 votes for not guilty, 27 votes for a hung jury right now is happening. Bailey Love says the best thing to do as a host or person in general is to listen and to learn and to keep an open mind. I agree. That's one of the things we should always do. Keep an open mind, have good conversation with your chat. And again, I think the argument was a fantastic argument, because that's usually, other normal mom's argument was exactly what my argument typically is don't give these people attention. But I felt like due to the ideology of that meme, I felt like it needed to be addressed. She says here, I'm the biggest hypocrite. Don't take me seriously. Sometimes I can't get out of bed till I've taken down a troll. Okay, fair enough. Like you get a troll a day, we'll keep the doctor away. Perfect. All right, so excellent. We'll continue here. So this post continues here. I'll reread it. This is organized by the same group that organized a rally outside the Norfolk Superior Courthouse in Dedham during both of Karen Read's murder trials. That's not true. At least I'm of that belief. There are expected to be a number of rallies like it across the U.S. One has even been advertised in the Netherlands. It comes after we've learned more about Lindsay Clancy, the person she was in the days, months, and years before, blah, blah, blah. So that ended up continuing there. So that was kind of the post that had been posted, obviously, on X that also set off quite a few people as well, just with its ideology and viewpoint on matters that have been out there and that have been discussed. And I think that, unfortunately, I think every single group should be looked at individually for what they're speaking to and all that. It may have been the rumor that I'm hearing is that it's Sue O'Connell is what, because I saw the post about this and it was a response to Sue O'Connell. Let me see here. This is the post right here. Unfiltered Thoughts, Justice for John O'Keefe made this post. And we got the post right here. Yeah, another normal mom's out there doing the Lord's work, trolling the trolls. When the trolls troll you, she trolls the trolls. All right, there we go. Continuing. All right, so this was Unfiltered Thoughts, Justice for John O'Keefe. This was the response that the poster that made this. There was a silent standout for Lindsay Clancy at the Plymouth Superior Courthouse this morning. NBC 10 Boston writes, quote, this is organized by the same group that organized a rally outside Norfolk Superior Courthouse in Dedham for the Karen Read trials. Is it actually, though? Where is Turtleboy? Where is Dana? Where is Tracy Murray? Where is Erica? Where is Tom CPU? This is appalling and misleading. Then he tagged Turtleboy, Nick and Jenna Rocco. Not sure who this is by their name alone. Boston Mike, Tommy CPU, John Cuomo, Erica Walsh, Jenna Rocco again, and then Sue O'Connell. Tell your employer to get the facts right. And then this post ended up going there. And a couple comments here. Jenna Rocco addressed Sue O'Connell right here. Erica Walsh also had some things to say. How wild to assume that one group backs the other. That's mainstream media working hard for their government hacks, making it look like we all want anarchy and disorder. H-Bag says this has nothing to do with Karen Read. Why do you compare the groups? There goes the press doing their best fascism. Why can't I say fascism today? There we go. I just said it. Impersonation again. Thoughts on this, Sue? Unreal. Unreal. So that kind of surfaced online as well. So again, a lot of back and forth there. Right. And, like I said, this has been kind of getting a little hotly contested online between just perceptions, viewpoints, all of that. I saw a post from Dream Feed Media about Kelsey Fitzsimmons. Kelsey Fitzsimmons was honest about her postpartum struggles, and look how that turned out. Child stolen, career ended, shot, blamed, jailed, and still fighting for proper reunification with her baby boy. Of course, women are afraid to tell their whole truth. That's another thing. It's just, again, what ends up happening. This is a post I saw here. I'll read through it. This one kind of caught my eye. I don't know this. I don't know who this person is online, but not familiar with this page. But I saw this post, and this kind of caught my eye here. I can't recall if I read the whole thing. We'll see. Lionel from Lionel Media. Do I follow him? No. Official account of Lotus. Lindsay Clancy was most certainly failed by her medical providers. She most certainly suffered a severe reaction to medication. Those questions deserve scrutiny and may raise issues of medical negligence or other liability. I mean, look, regardless of what happens to Lindsay Clancy, there needs to be this. There needs to be the scrutiny. There needs to be a look into there needs to be a huge review on this matter. This could definitely change a lot of things in the medical industry. It should. But there needs to be more analysis. But they do not answer the criminal question. Here he goes. Clancy repeatedly told others, I'm going to say this again. Clancy repeatedly told others that she was having thoughts of harming her children. That matters because those warnings suggest awareness. And again, this is a big point. You know, if she told others that she was having thoughts about harming her children, you know, I think society-wise, we need to start making some changes here because that's a pretty big statement. That matters because those warnings suggest awareness. And to the people in her life's credit, a lot of times people hear this and just think maybe that person's just having a tough day. They're stressed out, you know, because they know him well. They probably know that, you know, Lindsay would never do anything like that. And if they hear something like that, you know, maybe she's just, you know, sometimes it gets written off because no, Lindsay would never do that. You know, it's just, she's just having a tough time today. She's stressed out. She's been having, you know, sometimes that stuff can get written off just like that, you know, which is sometimes tough to, you know, because again, people see that person as a good person. They probably know she'd never do that. And, you know, that's sometimes a concern, you know, can get overlooked. That matters because those warnings suggest awareness. She recognized that the thoughts were dangerous. She understood that something was terribly wrong. And once a person recognizes that she may harm her children, there's an obligation to act. Seek immediate intervention, remove herself from access to the children, and make certain she is not left alone with them. Her own statements may therefore cut both ways. They support the existence of serious mental illness and support the prosecution's argument that she appreciated the danger and wrongfulness of what she feared she might do. It's tragic, sick, horrific, and she's guilty. I don't know if this means that he thinks she's going to be legally speaking guilty or just straight up guilty of the murder itself. But that was a comment that was made. You made me sick with your barbaric takes on this case. This is, I think, someone I know here. Yeah, you made me sick with your barbaric takes on this case. I hope others unsubscribe from your YouTube account and stop following you. Disappointing. I'm just going to see what people think. Yeah, so again, just south of history is going after him here. What part of a psychosis break do you not seem to understand? I think Nancy TV says, must be a Turtleboy supporter. I think she is guilty, but not criminally responsible. If you can be both those things. She was failed. She was clearly very, very sick. She needs to go away for a very long time, but I think others are almost as responsible as she is, including her husband. This person just flat out says, you know, this could be a woman who's a mother, for example. Looks like she's from Arizona or something with the cactuses. 100% she is guilty and she needs to be in prison for the rest of her life. Another argument about the husband here. This is definitely kind of in the. Here we go. She called the suicide hotline twice, and she was rejected as was rejected as an inpatient treatment by the hospital, all because she did not have a plan. Someone says the husband was complicit. This woman thinks that the husband did it. A descent into madness should be left to the one spiraling. The entire family was aware and yet did nothing. I'm not casting blame. I'm merely stating a fact. Her speaking about it was doing something about it. Well, she had the frame of mind still to do so. Yeah, it's a lot of argument. I mean, this post this comment section here tells me exactly what I need to think about the variety of perspective on this entire case. You just see, like, with the Karen Read case, it was more like, okay, she did it or she didn't do it, right? With this, it's like every post is just a different variation, a different combination, a different, when you look at, say, people outside of the free Karen Read, people that are here are probably, I'm guessing most of us are Turtleboy, Kelsey, Karen supporters predominantly here, but you look at those posts online and you just see like how every post is almost like a different variation, a different combination of theology on this entire matter. And that's why I think, when you look back at our poll here with this hung jury at 57%, that's why I think this thing could really go off the rails behind closed doors in terms of people not agreeing. You know what I mean? That's definitely how I feel, this could go, for sure. Because it just, again, look at the way people, look at the response to that post. Even his post, I was having trouble with his post, even identifying, was he supporting her? Was he not supporting her? Was he, and then one of the posts from just south of history, who I know online, ripped them apart for that post. And I was looking at that post like, is this kind of for her, against her, whatever? But, again, you see the variation of arguments there that's going on. I see Candace Owens said Lindsay Clancy is obviously not guilty. There was arguments online going all over the place. Another argument here was that feminists are now lined up cheering as Lindsay Clancy arrives to court where she's on trial for admitting to strangling her 3 children to death with a rope. Aidan Carney responded to this one. He said, these women made a complete mockery of the Lindsay Clancy trial today. We cheered for Karen Read because she's completely innocent and didn't kill anyone. Lindsay Clancy killed her 3 children. You can have empathy for her, as I do. You can believe she is not guilty by reason of insanity, which I am inclined to believe. But 3 innocent children are dead, he says, and these idiots are out here cheering for her like she's a celebrity and posing for selfies with Reddington. Disgusting. That is one thing I think that is a good argument, because I think with Karen Read was fighting the system. It was Karen Read didn't commit murder. It was she was fighting a system. And we were cheering her because she was standing up to the system. I think with Lindsay Clancy, it's she did it, but there's the psychosis argument, there's the insanity argument, there's the medication, you know what I mean? So I think, like, I would say this. If you wish to support her publicly, do so, but I wouldn't play it up like, oh my God, there she is, like that kind of, like, I wouldn't take that kind of so I agree with Aiden's argument here. I would not take it to the point of, oh my God, there she is. Yeah, this is a fucking tragedy. It is. It's a tragedy. Yeah, and I think the thing on this too, Scott, is I don't think any single one of us is ever going to have like I said, it's multiple. It's like a combination. More solemn support would probably be the approach. That I would say probably that's a good comment right there. Solemn support, right? I would keep it like, in that, like when I started following Kelsey Fitzsimmons' trial, right? When I started covering that, one of the first things I said, and these were internal thoughts I had before I covered the case, is I'm trying to put my words together to say this exactly how I thought it. One of the things, when I started to cover Kelsey's case, started to do fundraisers, started to talk about it, I had a couple reality checks in my head that I went through. Let me get a drink of water. I'm going to talk about this for a second. All right. I put myself through a series of reality checks before I started covering Kelsey, advocating for all this stuff. And the first thing I said is, Mark, the first thing you must realize, this is my internal dialogue, this is not the Karen Read case. This is not the same person. This is not the same family. This is not the same town. This is not the same story. This is a completely different thing. In other words, what I said to myself was, whatever the Karen Reed case was, whatever that was in terms of getting to know their family, getting to know Karen, the atmosphere, all of that, I had to remember that I couldn't just start approaching covering Kelsey's story by just walking in the door like, oh, this is going to be another Karen Reed story. I had to ask myself, critical questions such as, will these people even welcome my support? Do these people even want me to talk about this on my show? Do they even want me to do fundraisers? Do they appreciate this, or do they maybe look at me as like, this guy needs to go away? You know what I mean? So I took it very, very slow, very, very slow, and kind of crawled into it. And then over time, I found out Kelsey was very happy with my shows and the fundraisers and the support. When I met her father, very positive with me as well. So, I think with every different one of these cases, you have to really mentally, like, you just can't walk up. Like, this is kind of my gist of my point here is, you can't clap and cheer on Lindsay the same way you can clap and cheer on Karen, because it's a different story. This is not Karen Reed, who was framed, who's fighting for her freedom in a massive cover-up, right? This is a woman that did, at the end of the day, actually commit this murder, but there's obviously layers to it, meaning it's not that she absolutely just, it's not like a horror movie where she just decided to, someone that just murders people. This was obviously based on what I can reckon, a level of psychosis, postpartum medications combining for a perfect storm. Warning signs were there. So I would say yes. I would say not to clap. I would say not to clap. I would say not to make this a celebrity, thing, because like someone said there before, I think it was None It's Your Business that said it, solemn support. If you want to be there to solemnly support, like, hey, look, we're here because it's a tragedy, and all that. Because I think at the end of the time, yeah, exactly, Scott. All different cases, all different issues, but I think that there's different layers to all of them, and I have not seen that, but you can send that my way if you want to email me, or someone can tag me in it, or someone wants to tag me on that. Right, I think decorum would be it. I think, like I said, just walking into this, like, there's people out there like, hey, this is going to be another Karen Reed or Kelsey, and let's get out there and let's just do that. I think, again, do support her. If you would like to be out there, be out there. If you'd like to make your argument, hold the sign. But I just say I wouldn't, because they used to say, oh, they made Karen into a celebrity. Well, you know what, Karen Reed was right to be a celebrity because she didn't commit murder, and not only did she not commit murder, she was framed. And so I think you can make a celebrity out of someone like that because they're justifiably fighting for their freedom. They're kind of having to go the sympathetic hero's route. I think with Lindsay, this is a tragedy. This is, and this what happened to what happened from, say, doctors could be sued, all that stuff. So I think it's different layers. But like I said, I think people should absolutely, if they decide they want to support her for reasons such as the belief that postpartum medicine factored in, definitely. Absolutely, if you choose to support her. But I think if you want to, like Aiden was arguing there, the clapping, the cheering, like that's, it's I'll just put it this way. Sometimes there's a difference between weddings and funerals, if not all the time, right? I think the only common denominator between a wedding and a funeral is that family members are there. You know what I mean? But it's a different atmosphere. It's a different group. It's a different scenario. It's a different story, and all that. And I think that's why, again, not cheering, not doing that is probably going to be a better approach to have in this situation. Let me see if I have anything else for this topic, and then we're gonna get into. I think we're ready to. Actually, we have one more. Actually, Sarah Be Creative tagged me on something. Let me take a look at that, and then we're gonna switch gears here. See what 2 different posts I've been tagged. Okay, so he found a tie-in here about Mark Gilday, Judge Gilday, currently overseeing 2 lawsuits involving the Karen Reed, John O'Keefe, Turtleboy, HAM matters. Served for 11 years as the registered agent for 2 companies run by the owner of Amelia's in Stoughton. Interesting. Very interesting there. Let me see what this other post is about. This is the one where he links it to a tax fraud case, federal tax fraud. Okay. I'll have to dig into that at another time. I'm going to switch gears here to, we're just going to go to Turtleboy mode here. All right, we still got the poll. And I'm going to close this poll now. And we got people, 1%, 1 person, 2%, one person, but 2% of the vote said Clancy will be guilty. 20 people or 41% said not guilty. And 28 people or 57% said hung jury. We will stop that poll now. All right, that's the final poll. All right, and we shall hide that. All right, good. All right, thank you guys for that poll. All right, we will switch gears. We're going to talk about Turtleboy, who had a deposition yesterday with Diller, who he calls another name. He has a nickname for him that I won't repeat on this show. But yes, he just refers to him as another object, just to put it mildly. But yes, Aiden is out there. Let's see if we get this video. There we go. One second here, folks. I had a little trouble. Okay, here we go. All right, so Aiden here. All right, there we are. Let's get this played. So Aiden did he was driving home yesterday from his deposition, and he had some items to share in that. So this is the drive home here.
Impromptu live.
Set up here. There we go. All right.
Quick one. Quickie, that's what they say. That's what she said. Woo. All right. Hello, everybody. Okay, I'll fill people in momentarily. I'm like sitting on. Oh yeah, let people stroll on in here. This is it. And want to kill myself. I mean, just you couldn't be a more boring person than him. Oh my god. So I'm going to go over it more tonight on Sex Cult. So join Turtle Club if you haven't joined so already. $15 a month. You got access to Thursday streams that no one else gets, and you get ad free on the website when you go read the articles. We all know how much a pain in the ass those things are. So yeah, you can go back and go join. I'll be going over the whole thing. But no, I didn't get to eat. I ate nothing. So I'll give you a brief.
That's the thing that drove me crazy about the whole deposition yesterday is you don't get a chance to have a time to eat any break at all, which is kind of wild. And then he got criticized. Turbo's getting criticized online by his detractors for not, I guess he didn't appear for the last deposition, so they criticized him for that. Then he shows up for the deposition. This thing goes pretty much all day long. And then all of a sudden his detractors are like, now that he's actually shown up for the deposition, like, well, now he left early and his attorney Randazzo was being this, and that. It's just funny stuff. The way they always try to spin it against them is wild. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the plan, has been, it seems like it's all financial delay. And I like he explains why he pled the fifth very eloquently. And I think this is another point where, like, for example, the civil suits right now make sense for Karen Reed because her criminal cases are over. Right now, it doesn't make sense for Turtleboy's situation because he's still got a pending case coming up and a trial coming up in December. So right now, this is, they're going to ask them all these questions. They want to have deposition. And at this point, how can you, whether or not you want to answer the questions or not, you're still preparing for trial right now. It's like if Karen Reed had faced a civil suit in between her two trials, for example, she wouldn't be able to answer these questions. So as always, this is what I don't like. Like, for example, I understand that certain people don't like Turtleboy, right? I understand that certain people hope for the worst for him, want him to go to jail, prison, want him to basically have the worst life imaginable going forward. They want the worst. I totally understand this. You know what I'm saying? It's obvious. I mean, look, anybody that's ever talked about, I posted this video on X yesterday, and a bunch of people were in the comments like saying this and that about Turtleboy, and a few of them might have even disparaged me. But that's the territory. That's what ends up happening. It's just, unfortunately, there's people that don't like this guy. But at the end of the day, he does have the right to be a journalist, and he does have the right to fight for his rights, to speak from a First Amendment standpoint. But what I don't like is that when certain things are done, such as having to leave a deposition after a certain amount of time or pleading the fifth, at the end of the day, I always, this is what I always say, and I say this about a lot of things in my personal life. If you're going to critique somebody negatively, you're free to do so, but do so on a measured, analytical level. In other words, if Aidan Carney pleads the fifth because he has a trial coming up, and you know for a fact that he has a trial coming up because it's known for a fact, in other words, you don't sit there and say, oh, he's dodging the questions, he's afraid, that's not an accurate situation. The fact is, there is a trial coming up, a criminal trial. And when you have legal counsel will request that you don't speak about your criminal case at all. And to be clear, Aidan will tell us quite a bit about what happens in his life in terms of cases. But he can only say so much. Mark Betterow has been on multiple shows, but again, when he talks about any of these matters, it's subdued. There are certain things that can be discussed. There are certain things not to be discussed. So I always argue, I'm like, look, if you wish to argue negatively or argue against Aidan, do so in a quantified manner. In other words, don't sit there and say, oh, well, he pled the fifth because he's guilty. He pled the fifth because he has a pending criminal case. Let's keep things measured. Things need to be measured here. And I always say, like I said, you're free to, think what you think about Karen Reed, Turtleboy, whatever. You're free to do that, and people are free to love me or hate me. And I don't consider that a weak approach. I consider that an open-minded approach. In other words, that's the reality, folks. If you're going to be online, if you're going to fight for Karen Reed or support whomever, criticism's coming your way. I post about Aidan, they're going to come for me, and that's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, Aidan Carney, I think, has the right to be a journalist. I think he has the right to the First Amendment. And I think Karen Reed had the right to talk to journalists about her case. And I think that is an undisputed argument. And I think that reporters can interview people in public. And I think that's undisputed. I think that's just my theory on it at the end of the day. But again, pleading the fifth here is reasonable.
Go join. I'll be going over the whole thing. But no, I didn't get to eat. I ate nothing. So I'll give you a brief overview, and then we'll get more into it tonight. It's all going to come back to me. But holy shit. So basically, the first 2 hours, it was me talking about myself, just asking me. It was like fun. The first 2 hours was fun. We got to talk all about my journalism, my history, everything that I've done, my major hits. We talked about.
Well, I think the thing, too, that's favorable towards him, and if anybody was ever to say, question his methods of reporting, his methods of journaling, I think that his methods have always been consistent, meaning however he interviews people, asks people questions, writes about people, has always been consistently the same. I think the only thing that's changed for Aidan is the fact that the people that he was writing about, or the people that he was asking questions of, or the case that he was following, was a completely different animal. And as a result of this, let's just say there's areas and people that decided they wanted to bump back. and for reasons that I think we can all probably presume. Again, there was people out here that didn't like this being talked about. You saw the Massachusetts State Police. You saw the people show up at his house, show up at Karen's house. If Karen Read, like I said, if Karen Read is truly being framed, and this is truly a cover up, and Aiden decides to write about it and talk about it on his show, then they go after him. They appear at his house in October, arrest him again in November or December 2023. It probably means whatever they're talking about, whatever they're writing about, probably true. Because I don't imagine, and I've said this before, I don't imagine if everything Aiden was writing about and everything Karen may have been sharing with him and everything he may have been journaling and writing about, if all that information was not true, I personally don't think that there would be this level. I don't think Aiden would have ever had the cops outside his house. I don't think the cops would have been back outside Karen's house and she would have had to have called up her dad and her dad would have been out. I think really, in honesty, not only did Aiden share the story, but I think the way he was responded to by the officers involved in the investigation by going after him validated the entire argument about Karen Read and what Karen Read was trying to make. In other words, obviously Karen and Aiden are telling the truth here because it was validated by the fact. I mean, look, if you're writing about certain cops being this, and that this happened to Karen because, and all of that, and it's not true, I don't think these cops are really going to care. But if the story is true and it bothers them, why wouldn't they try to get your phones, try to get your computers, try to get your devices, try to get Karen's phone, try to get her devices, try to get everything possible known to man? They try to pin these two together in a conspiracy. And it showed me that in real time as this was happening to Aiden, it showed me that whatever Karen was talking about was true. And the way they went after Aiden proved that Karen was revealing the truth. And that this information getting out here was a serious threat to somebody, or maybe a lot of people. And they wanted these people to shut up. They wanted every Karen Read supporter and every supporter of Turtleboy to shut up. Shut our mouths. Go home. You pink shirts need to go home. You pink shirts support the murder of a cop. And you pink shirts probably today support the murder of children if you support Lindsay Clancy, right? That's what this has been about. It's been about fear. It's been about telling us to back down. It's been about telling us to shut up. And this is why ideologically people say, Mazza, why are you neutral? Why do you support Karen and Aiden? What about this? What about that? I'll tell you why. Because again, the same people, Karen Read and Aiden Carney, are being attacked or sued by the same people. It says Karen Read and Aiden Carney on those documents. They're after both of them. It's a package deal. And I think they, regardless of whatever's changed over the last year, it's still Aiden Carney and Karen Read versus all of these people, and all of these people versus Aiden Carney and Karen Read, and that's how I look at it. And this is a story that needs to end with a lot of positive results. We need Adam Deitch to get elected in Norfolk County. Aiden Carney needs to be acquitted, and Karen and Aiden need to have their battle in court against these people that are suing them. Go all the way in court, have their attorneys outduel them, and win the day, and win these civil suits. And that's, to me, that's what this whole story is about, and that's what this whole thing's about, and it's what it should be about. And at the end of the day, people out there maybe don't like Aiden Carney, don't like what he has to say, don't like him as a person. Understood. I understand that people out there don't like certain people, and certain people aren't liked by everybody. Totally get it. But bottom line is here, Aiden Carney did popularize the Karen Read story, and did, just like Karen Read, fight this fight. He could have backed down. He could have really bitched out back in 2023, and just slammed on the brakes, but the guy chose to move forward. And for that, he's continuing fourth here. And I think that this battle for justice needs to be won. And again, I think that this is this is a battle that's going to go on for the foreseeable future. But at the end of the day, look, I don't think this guy should spend another moment in his life behind bars. And I don't think he should ever spend a moment of his life behind bars to begin with. And there's people that really deserve karma, God's wrath for what they've done here. And, and that's just the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. And that's it. So we'll continue forward here.
The Ali Bebo story we talked about and do so, although you want he's asking weird questions about that. We talked all about that. We talked all about like the history of Turtleboy, and I'll explain all in Sex Cult tonight where I think he was going. TV spoke do. We stream right from the website, and I'll go over everything that happened tonight. But boy, was he a dildo. So the first 2 hours, man, we talked all about how I built this Turtleboy empire that we have today, and how this all came about, and like number of followers and the trials and tribulations of Turtleboy, and I'll explain it all. But then, okay, so then that was good because I'm actually answering questions. And then noon came, okay, and then
I think that I'm not trying to defend Diller, but I think that if you're in Diller's position, I think those are for deposition. Those are probably questions you want to know. Is what tell us a bit about Turtleboy's background, your story, what's your history, what do you have websites, YouTube, what do you talk about? I'm sure he knows those answers, but you get familiar with the person being deposed, just like as you would if it was Michael Proctor. Your Master's of State police officer, why did you want to become a cop, how long have you been a cop, blah 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 blah. You go through the whole thing.
He was like, then came the Karen Reed questions, which is what we're all here for, right? Again, I don't know what any of this has to do with me. I just write the stories.
Well, great argument. Because when have you ever heard about a journalist being deposed for writing about somebody? It's like if somebody wrote for Trump, the president, right? Or you wrote about another person, a public figure, an athlete. You wrote for Jason Tatum. You wrote for President Trump. You wrote for Jason Tatum. You wrote for Jason Statham, the actor. You wrote about somebody and something happened, and now you're being deposed for something else. It's like if Lois Lane was writing about Superman, and Superman, something happened there. Superman was blamed for something that happened, and now all of a sudden it's Lois Lane. You wrote about. You work for the Daily Planet, right? And you wrote about Superman. And Crypto the Super Dog did something in public, and people think Superman did it, but it was really his dog. Why did you write about this? It's just why? How often do you ever hear about a journalist being asked questions about stuff like this? Just crazy.
Do the shows. That's what I do in the activism. That's what I do. Anyway, I made it very clear. Like, and he knows going into this that we were pleading the fifth, and the whole exercise in this was just to get me down there and inconvenience.
He knows going into this that he was pleading the fifth.
And blah, 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 blah. And get it on the record that I'm pleading the fifth. A serious attorney, after, asks, like, so are you going to plead the fifth to everything related to this? So we don't have to waste everyone's time, not just his time, because he was there with two associates.
It was in the movie Raw Deal with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm probably one of 5 people that's ever seen the movie or remembers the movie. There was a guy on the stand and he goes, I plead the fifth. And I plead the fifth to that and that. And every single question you're going to ask after that, I'm just going to plead the fifth on everything you're going to ask. Saves time.
2 young guys. One guy had a really nice suit on. I complimented his suit. And a young gal. And, a court reporter. And the videographer. And Karen Reed's had an attorney. Yes, I see.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know what? That's the best argument that I've never heard before that I've ever heard before. Now, meaning just as I hear about this, I've never even had this thought in my life. But that's an amazing point right there. Over 300 photos inside Aiden Carney's house, but not one photo inside of 34 Fairview that night. That's a massive argument right there. When in the history of mankind? My goodness gracious. Wow. That's a heck of a comment right there.
I see it. Okay. Yeah, we'll stick with that. Yeah. So, yeah, it's good to do road work right now. 5 o'clock is a great time to do road work on the mass bike. Great idea. We thought of that out. Anyway, so he's like, yeah, he starts asking me questions and like about, he's got my whole phone extraction, right? That he just got, that we didn't really oppose, really. He's like, go ahead, knock yourself out. He's got Natalie's phone extraction, and we go through all my messages with Natalie. That's what we did for like 5 hours, just go through my messages with Natalie. I think we got like through like 3 weeks worth of messages. And he's just like, so, yeah, when you...
At 3 o'clock on that Tuesday, did you or did you not tell Natalie that you would text her back 3 hours later because you needed to go out to get cheeseburgers and French fries for dinner? Did you say that? Did you say, it's just 3 weeks of text.
Said this, and you would think this guy was representing the McAlberts. Everything was about the McAlberts. Like, do you represent the O'Keefes? We finally got to the O'Keefes, like, by the end. And it's just like a real lawyer. We have all these people here, okay, who are getting paid. Everyone's getting paid except me. And then we have like the attorneys for C.F. McCarthy's, who was on Zoom, the attorney for the Waterfall on Zoom. You had Damon Seligson on Zoom, and of course Paul O'Keefe Gawkin, he was on Zoom too, watching this whole thing. They were not there in person. And so I don't know who the hell's paying for this shit, but holy shit, what a waste of time. A real attorney asks you like, okay, so you're after 3 or 4 times, like, so you're just going to plead fit to everything? Yes. And then, okay, cool. Thank you. Noted. We're done here. But no, he wanted to go through every single question. And then I'm like, bro, no lunch. He didn't do any lunch. No break. Like, besides the piss, nothing. No like offer of it. Like, you guys hungry? Nothing. Blah, blah, blah. Nothing. Just like, and wasting everyone's time. Like what you just saw. I would laugh. There's no way any lawyer's doing this on a contingency, because this is a loser case and you're suing. Can't read an eye. And you're like, this is just the biggest waste of time ever. And so finally, I'm there with Randazza.
And Randazza, the thing about Randazza,
at 4:30, we asked to take a 2-minute break.
The thing about Randazza is Randazza's always going to tell you exactly how you feel. If you think you're going to ask Randazza anything and he's not going to give you like above and beyond exactly what he thinks of every moment of every part of reality, he's going to tell you. You know, that's funny.
And we just discussed it, and we're like, okay, we're going to see what this guy wants. Like, if he can finish in the next half hour, by 5, we'll be done. But if he's talked about like, oh, we'll just continue this another day. He's like, if that's the policy, you'll just continue another day. We're out of here. We are out of here. And, finally Randazza is just like, I've kept quiet about this. I have bit my tongue. We've been civil with you guys. But like at this point, this is like just abusive. Like what you're doing you're just fucking with us. Like this is a waste of everyone's time. The dude talks like Eeyore. He talks so slow. Every question starts with the same shit. So is that your phone number there? Yes. And so you're in the blue, and this is you messaging the phone number for Natalie Wiki. Yes. And this is the time and date of May 15th at 4:10 p.m. Yes. And in the message, you are saying that Karen Reed is telling you.
It's just on and on it goes. These depositions are kind of annoying. It's again insane. I don't know what these badgering questions. What did Karen Reed say? Did Karen Reed tell you? It's like in Police Academy. Mahoney told us to do this, sir. Is that true? Did Mahoney tell you? Did Mahoney do this? Excuse me. I think the scene was Mahoney. They lied about Mahoney doing something. And like, Mahoney did this, sir. Is that true? Did Mahoney do this? It's the same thing with this whole Karen Reed thing. They want to make it seem like Karen Reed conspired with a journalist to do everything that happened out there. you know, as if that he was this sword carrier. Oh, sorry, I got a phone call. I've been working with somebody in my town about a matter that about the history of the town. I'm doing doing some research on my family's history, and I'm trying to get some information. So they're getting back to me at like 2 o'clock on a Saturday with the information I'm seeking. So looking for historical photographs is what I'm after right now. So I'm trying to find some photos of my grandfather and great grandfather that I know exists, and I know the town has in their possession somewhere. So I'm calling this town to try to get that information and get digital copies of it. Figure out if I can get to that. All right, so there we go. The person always calls me at the most inconvenient times. So there's the text again. Let's see what this is about. Something about the selectman's office. Yeah, they're digging. They just need more info. All right, they're digging. They just need some info. Yeah. No, I'm good. No, I got to do my show. I'll get back to her. I'll get back to her. Yeah, they're doing some digging right now. I just need more information. All right. So, yes. Again, these long lists of questions. Again, they're trying to tie in Karen and Aiden. Like, you know, basically, you know, they're acting like, you know, Karen handed him the hypothetical sword to go out there and just do her bidding, and Karen Reed was this, he was just doing his evil bidding for Karen. You know, all these things that happened were really because of Karen, and she put you up to this, and she told you all this stuff, didn't she? It's kind of like the angle they're taking, it appears to me.
To write about Paul O'Keefe. Objection. The Karen Reed's lawyer objects. I got to wait for them to object because the court reporter didn't like when I talked over him. And the court reporter, a very nice lady who was hungry too. They didn't offer her a lunch. 3 o'clock, she asked for a break so she could, 5-minute break so she could eat her soup. She packed soup. He wouldn't let her eat her soup. The lovely court reporter.
The court reporter couldn't even eat her soup. This is how outrageously long this thing went. Can I have my soup, sir? Sir, I've been sitting here typing all day. Can I please have my soup now? And I think he says they made her eat it in the hallway or something. She had to eat it real quick. I'm like, this is just crazy. Unbelievable. I mean, I understand depositions can be a little intense and everything, but my goodness gracious.
Tony, female, Tony with an eye, wouldn't let her eat her soup. She had to eat it in the hallway fast, right? Because Dildo wants to waste everyone's time. And it's like, every question was going through those stupid messages and be like, did you say this? Yes, I said that. Okay. And this is you telling Paul O'Keefe, you're telling Karen Reed, or is this Karen Reed telling you to write about Paul O'Keefe? And that's when I assert the fifth. I made it clear to him. He's like, and you have to tell me why you're asserting the fifth. Okay. I will tell you why I'm asserting the fifth. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts is alleging, and I disagree with this, they are alleging that my journalism, activism, satire, YouTube presentations, all of it is illegal. It is against the law, they say. It is.
When in the history of journalism, okay, has Lois Lane of the Daily Planet ever gotten in trouble for writing an article about Superman in any Superman movie that's ever been made? Okay, this is just outrageous that this guy is a journalist. I've never heard about it. If you look and say, oh, the guy is a blogger, he's a content, whatever you want to call him, a journalist, blogger, content, any of those people, known to man. Doesn't matter how you categorize Aiden Carney. You can call him whatever you want. You can call him a journalist. You can call him the blogger. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is. My point is in the history of any of this kind of reporting, when is this individual that's sitting in the seat he's sitting in, and I don't mean the chair, I mean hypothetically as a journalist, ever basically been asked these kinds of questions in the history of our society? This is unprecedented stuff. It's absolutely outrageous to see. And it's incredible to watch in terms of like, is this really for real? You know, just unbelievable.
And because of that, because they are saying that all of my journalism pertaining to the Karen Reed case is illegal.
How is reporting illegal, right? How is he writing about a story, giving his theories, parodiizing matters, talking about things? How is that illegal? Journalism is not a crime. It's important to know that. I think he even coined that phrase. Or maybe somebody else did, but he uses it at least. Journalism is not a crime. You know, you have the right to the freedom of the press in this country. You know, you have the press in the United States right now, news offices right now that have the, and we'll talk about Donald Trump for a second. Donald Trump is loved by a lot of people and he's hated by a lot of people. And there's people that are journalists that love Donald Trump, and there's people that are journalists that hate Donald Trump, right? In both cases, the journalists, whether they're for Trump or against Trump, have the right to cover his matters or talk about them however they'd like. If they want to say Trump is great, their media outlet has the right to do that. If they want to say Donald Trump is the biggest villain since Darth Vader, they have the right to say that too. It's called the right to be a journalist, right? You can have a network, you can have a website, you can have articles, blogs, whatever you want to call it. You can have YouTube shows or online shows or whatever you want to have, podcasts. You can have a view on any, you can talk about Lindsay Clancy right now, and you can say, I think I sympathize with her. Or you can get on your get on that show and say, I think she did it, right? You have the right as a journalist. I mean, you can even, as a journalist, say you think that Karen Reed supporters and Lindsay Clancy supporters are headed by the same people if you want, even though you're wrong. As a journalist, you have the right to do this. You have the right to talk about issues and say, well, I think OJ did it, or maybe I think he did not. It's called the First Amendment. Full stop. Mullen Law says exactly. And it's just how your journalism is illegal. How is my journalism illegal? You know, if local newspapers, you know, if the Boston Globe endorses Adam Deitch, is that illegal? If Boston Globe has negative things to say about Greg Conner, is that a crime? You know, that's what this really boils down to here is rights. Is rights. You have the right to talk about things. You have the right to say, Karen Reed did it. You have the right to say, Karen Reed didn't do it, and I think somebody else did. In fact, I think I have an idea who that might have been. It's just called journalism. There's numerous articles from numerous media outlets across the country that talk about matters, discuss matters, break matters down, talk about these things. Some of them do tend to avoid some topics that they don't want to touch on. But at the same time, it's like, my goodness, what you said was illegal. It's like having a theory on a matter, or Karen Reed talking to a journalist. You know, think about the time the O'Keefes, not the O'Keefes. Think about the time the McAlberts, 5 or 6 of them, I think, sat down, Brian Albert among them, sat down in a media room to meet with the national press following the first Karen Reed trial. Sat down, had a conversation with that journalist, gave their exact thoughts on the matter. Me and most of you didn't agree with it. But at the end of the day, look, they had the right to go on with the media, give their thoughts on this, whether you believe it or not, and say what they wanted to say. And you see that in multiple cases across this country that have, whether it's local, independent, or national media coverage, go on to say what they want to say, you know, speak to the press freely. And I don't see why Karen Reed going to Aidan Carney, sharing with Aidan Carney what her belief is of her situation is, believing she didn't murder John O'Keefe. And just because people say she murdered John O'Keefe, and just because she knows she didn't murder John O'Keefe, does not mean that she murdered John O'Keefe. I'll say that again. Just because people say she did it, and just because she knows she didn't do it, doesn't mean that she actually did it, right? And if she wants to go to the press, Boston Globe, Boston Herald, WBZ, Boston 25, NBC 10, probably not WCVB 5, Channel 7, talk to these networks, NECN, and talk to these networks and say, this is what I've been through. This is my experience. I don't believe that I did this because I know I didn't do it. And I feel that this is a cover-up. And if none of those media outlets want to cover her story, and it can be tough. It can be tough in media to get your story out there. Look at Lindsay Clancy's story, for example. Talked about when it first happened, not talked about for years until it hit trial. Because a lot of times, your big media outlets, and this is not to tear them apart, it's an analytical analysis, won't cover these stories because they don't think it's big enough of a story. They don't think it's front page news or second page news or even fifth page news, hypothetically, in the old newspaper days. Maybe they'll write an article online from time to time, but they won't give it the television coverage at the news at noon, 6 a.m. news, 6 p.m. news, whatever. And they won't talk about it. They won't cover it. They won't give you the time of day. And I believe Karen Read thought that there was a competing narrative out there, or a predominant narrative out there, that said Karen Read did this. Karen Read, quote unquote, killed John O'Keefe, and she will stand trial for it. And Karen Read felt, knowing full well she didn't do it, that she needed to get her voice out there. When she walked out of that courthouse and she was confronted there, and she said to the media, I didn't do it. And Carl Dougal replied, blah, 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 blah. And she says, we know who did it, Carl. Knock it off. You know, Karen Read was preaching to the media. She was doing everything she could to talk to the media then and share with them. I didn't do this. We know who did this. Somebody else did this. It wasn't me. And up until that point, the only media member of independent media that was willing to talk about this matter was the very man on the screen, Aidan Carney, Turtleboy, who would write about it in his articles, talk about it on his shows, put out information that he either researched on his own or maybe in his talks with Karen got, and the story started to gain traction. And it gained so much traction that the local media started to talk about it. That when Aidan Carney was arrested in October 2023, and I turned on the news at lunch break, that was on the news. When I turned on the news later that night, his arrest was on the news. His arrest was on the news, and they were talking about him because even though the local media outlets weren't talking about it, they were well aware of what was going on. Because Karen Read and Turtleboy together popularized this whole thing. They got that story out there. It was a fight. It took a while, but it gained traction, and it got out there. And people will say, well, Karen Read didn't have the right to do that. And Aidan didn't have the right to do this. Well, why was a predominant theory put out there that Karen Read did do this? And why did Karen Read feel such a need to put out an alternative theory? That perhaps if all that was out there about her was that she was a suspect, she did this. You ask the town police in Canton, you ask the state police, you ask Michael Morrissey's office, I'm sure they'll tell you. She's the suspect. She'll stand trial. This is going to court. You know, you turn on local news media outlets, they'll talk about Karen Read's arrest. They'll show her in handcuffs. They'll show her and David Yannetti in the early days out there. And that's all the coverage. All the coverage about her was against her. And God forbid she tries to get out there and say, you know what? I actually didn't do it. And you know what? I believe somebody else did. And she has the right to talk to the media. There's numerous people that have been either guilty or not guilty that have done that. And regardless of that fact, you still have the right to get your story out there. If you don't feel the whole story is being told, well, here's the thing. A narrative every day was being told about her prior to Turtleboy covering this. Basically, that narrative in all the news media was she did it. Or she's a suspect. Or the woman that's believed to have murdered her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, is back in court today. And that's pretty much what was dominated in the news. And I think Karen Read has the right to go to the media and make an argument and say, I didn't do this. And if she chooses to go through an independent journalist because local media can't help her, I feel like that's her right. If she wants to talk to Aidan Carney, share with him some information, and he wants to write about that, blog about it because he has the right to do so as a journalist, I feel like he should be able to go ahead and do that. And I don't think that that's a crime. I don't think that that's a crime. And if Aidan Carney wants to go out and ask questions, do some research, I've seen journalists that have knocked on people's homes, knocked on their doors. I've seen the media go to Michael Proctor's house before, haven't they? I've seen media knock on other people's doors and ask questions, run into people in public and ask people questions. And I don't think that that should be considered illegal. I don't think that that should be considered a crime in the grand scheme of things. I think that you should have the right to ask questions. And those people have the right to tell you to bleep off. Get away from me. We don't want to talk to you. Go away. Get the hell out of the lacrosse game. We don't want you here. And that's the way it goes. And like Aiden did, him and Richie took off. They left. They dispersed. But you look at this stuff in the grand scheme of things, and why is this such a criminal matter for? Why is this such a civil matter for? Why is this such a big deal? Have any other news reporters from local media outlets been in trouble for trying to ask questions? I remember one time the McAlberts walked right out of court in 2024. I think it was after either one of the pre-trial hearings or after the trial, had walked out the side. They walked out the front door. They banged around to the left and walked around the back left of the courthouse. And the media was right on them asking questions. Is that a crime? Is that illegal for local media to ask questions? There has to be, some lines here in terms of journalism, in terms of asking questions. And I think the bigger issue here is, do independent journalists have the right to talk about these matters? Which they should. They should have the same rights as local press and national press. In addition to that, I feel that he should have the right, that there should be no restriction in terms of whatever's typically legal. If you see a person in public and you ask them a question about something, is that a crime? No, it's not. So if you're an independent media member, is that a crime? No, it's not. Based on what I understand of the law. But I don't know if there's a different law in Norfolk County or in Massachusetts, apparently, and I certainly hope not. I feel like this ain't, someone says, simping ain't easy, but you sure achieve the goal. So this person's suggesting that I'm simping for Aiden Carney, when I'm really telling the whole story. But here's the fact. The reason why you're here is because you don't like what I have to say. And I completely understand that. And you're more than free to be here. But when people like this start to show up in my chat, it tells me I must be striking a nerve somewhere. It must be knocking the ball out of the park. I'm more than willing to get. Sipping ain't easy, but you sure achieved the goal, because God forbid anybody say anything positive about Turtleboy and Karen Reed. I guess this person may be coming from an anti-Karen Reed ideology. We'll wait for them to express it. We'll see what they have to say. But again, this is not, while this person tries to say, oh, you're simping for Aiden, simping for Karen, whatever the suggestion is, free to have that ideology. Again, what you're doing is not illegal. You have the right. Look, that person has the right to come in this comments and say, Mazza, I think that you're a simp. I think that you're a simp for Aiden Carney and Karen Reed. Not a crime. Not a crime. Freedom of speech. Miss GNX is using her First Amendment right. And First Amendment rights are free to have. You're free to have freedom of speech in the United States of America. It's a great thing. It's fantastic. It's great how that works. Gotta love it. You gotta love it. Someone says I'm a simp. That's their right. They have the right to say that. End of the day, if you're a journalist, you have the right to be a journalist. If you're Karen Reed and you want to talk to a journalist, you have the right to talk to a journalist. It's not a crime. Karen Reed talked to national media after the first trial, didn't she? The McAlberts talked to national media after the second trial, did they not? You have the right to do that. So journalism shouldn't be illegal. It should be something you're freely able to do in this country. And we got an ME raid. A me raid, good to see you. Absolutely. Here we go. Continuing.
Not answer any questions about that until the matter is fully adjudicated. And we would be more than happy to answer all of your questions when it's over. When it's over, you can.
Again, judging the question, pleading the fifth. We have a criminal case, a raider raid. Good to see you guys. Again here, what is he saying? He's saying that I have to plead the fifth because of an impending criminal case that is well known. It's a criminal trial that is well known. That is not in dispute. Diller knows this. They know that this is a questions he can't answer. Maybe he could answer some of the questions, I guess. I'm sure he could probably talk about, Have you been a blogger for 15 years or a journalist for 15 years, whatever they want to call him? I'm sure he can answer that question. But as it pertains to his criminal trial, I'm not sure he can do that. I'm not sure that he can go ahead and talk about this information at all. And he has to plead the fifth, like Aiden said. Diller should have known that. And if he did know that and he still proceeded forward with this deposition, then why? And is it a waste of time? Aiden suggests that it is. And it just seems like it goes on and on. Many suggest they're just kind of going after his wallet. And that's the bottom line. But yeah, I think that end of the day, it's you can't be a journalist. Come on.
Satire, YouTube presentations, all of it is illegal. It is against the law, they say. And because of that, because they are saying that all of my journalism pertaining to the Karen Reed case is illegal, I cannot answer any questions about that until the matter is fully adjudicated. And we would be more than happy to answer all of your questions.
Right. Because they're saying his journalism is illegal, he cannot answer these questions until that has been adjudicated. Great answer. And great legal counsel there. Great legal counsel there for Aiden, making sure he was well prepared. You can't answer these questions. Pending criminal case going on. Plead the fifth. And that's it. And people out there don't like him will say, hey, look, he's pleading the fifth because he's hiding. Legal stuff is legal stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Civil suits, criminal cases, whatever. You have to do what your lawyers advise you to do. And just because your lawyers advise you to do that, it's not hiding anything. And like Aiden clearly stated here, we're more than willing to answer these questions. But look, I have a pending criminal case that I got to tend to. I got to deal with this first. And until that's dealt with, I'm sorry, but I think that's part of the problem here with these civil suits is it makes sense that Karen Reed's trial is over and this is happening, but it doesn't make sense that Aiden's trial is not over and this is happening. It would make more sense if both trials were over for both of them, then this happens. You know what I mean? Where Aiden basically has restriction. His legal team has restriction. There's only so far certain things can go here right now until, again, his criminal trial, which is, again, what, 5 months away, 4 months away, is taken care of, is over and done with. And up until that point, it's not going to happen. It's going to be, these processes need to go through their normal processes first, and then they can be taken from there. And that's the bottom line. And it's very simple information. I think that this deposition, again, I think this whole civil suit would have been better off happening after the fact for both cases. Given what Aiden's still having to endure presently with trial.
And we would be more than happy to answer all of your questions when it's over. When it's over, you can get whatever you want out of us. I will answer. We'll spend all day. I don't care. But until then, I am not admitting that anything I did is criminal, but the government is alleging that what I'm doing is criminal. Therefore, my hands are tied. I cannot answer anything about this whatsoever. That's it. So that's why I'm pleading the fifth. Not that I'm doing anything criminal. The government is alleging that what I'm doing is criminal. Therefore, I can't answer any questions about anything pertaining to my journalism, my investigation involving the Karen Reed case. Done. So he knows that. So any other local lawyer at that point is just like, okay, well, we don't want to waste not only my time, but he doesn't care about wasting my time, but his own time and his client's time and the Waterfall's time and the C.F. McCarthy's time. He is literally just running up the bill on everybody and having a good time doing it because God knows he can't get real work. And you're like, oh, how much time does he put into this shit? Like, bro, there is no way. Who is financing this shit? Like, that's what I want to know. If Paulo and Peggy O'Keefe are paying for this shit, which I can't imagine how they would afford this. Like, this is so expensive. Like, this whole thing today, God knows how much this cost. And so he's either an idiot and he thinks there's like some sort of payoff at the end here or the contingency, or he is running up the bill on some idiot clients. I don't know. Anyway, or he just likes my company. Whatever. So he thinks we're coming back. I'm sure he's going to file some motion now or whatever. We'll see what happens. I don't fucking know. But we walked out and Randazza was like, so he's like, you can't leave. And Randazza's like, are you going to tackle me? He's like, no, you can feel free to go, but we're going to be doing that. Okay.
If you leave, we will file another motion against you. I hope that you know this. It's like, Randazza's like, we have to tackle me. like I'm sure Randazzo was just taken by surprise by that. Like what's gonna, what do you mean we can't leave? Oh my goodness gracious, that's just incredible. I always like to see Randazzo's natural reactions to all this stuff. It's just very funny. All right, let's talk about Tim Bradl here. And Tim Bradl had a couple posts that he put out the other night. I'm trying to trace down right now. Here we go. Part 1, part 2. All right, let's take a look at his post online first and foremost. Then we'll take a look at these letters. All right, and maybe one more zoom. 200% sounds good to me. That looks good. All right, let's get this all zoomed in. All right, yeah, let's put this. All right, and put the post back up here. All right, there we go. Let me put a 3 in the chat. I think it's going to go to Hung Jury. Let me put a 3 in the chat for this poll, see if that affects it. There we go. Boop. All right, yep, it went on. All right. And GM, your vote didn't count, by the way, because I just reopened the poll. So just put the 2 back in again. And it should count for you. All right, let's talk about Tim Bradl. So Tim Bradl made a tweet the other night. This was the 19th, 3 days ago already. Wow. Someone said 420, making some jokes there. We all know about the 420 joke. All right, and moving forward here we go. All right, so Tim Bradl on X. We just filed a motion to stay the Taint Team cringe search of Aiden's devices in light of the imminent passage of the Journalist Shield Law. This legislation will stop the insidious infringement upon Aiden's First Amendment rights and preserve the sacred guarantee of confidentiality between a journalist and a confidential source. Please contact your legislator immediately to put this legislation over the top. This may be the final nail in the coffin for this unprecedented and unscrupulous, can't say that word all that well, prosecution. The law will essentially stop this intrusion in its tracks. For anyone who considers themselves a constitutionalist, now is the time to reach out and speak up for passage of this long overdue legislation. Stand by. I forgot to, I still have to do this. 1 second. Just going to set a reminder. All right, there we go. Do it later tonight. I forgot to do that. All right, we got poll coming in here for Lindsay Clancy verdict. Still coming up on the screen here. Not guilty by reason of insanity, NGM suggests. All right. Hey, Mazda, no matter what, good to see you. All right. So, yes, again, he says here, law will essentially stop this intrusion in its tracks. For anyone who considers themselves a constitutionalist, now is the time to reach out and speak up to your legislator for passage of this long overdue legislation. So that's being discussed right now. I think this has been pretty heavily talked about, too. This needs to change. And again, all of that regarding his devices. All right, let's take a step back here. Let's get these docs that he shared. All right, so this is part 1. Start opening it into when you see posts on Twitter, you have to open them up in a new tab. That's the kind of little secret here. Sure, audience. All right, so that's part 1. Let's get right into it. We'll go to part 2 afterwards. Zoom in here, and zoom in there, and share this tab, and put it back on the screen. Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right, good. And zoom in a little bit more here. Let's go to 125. Looks good. 125% looks great. Get set up, and here we go. Let me get a quick drink of water. All right, so this is from Tim Bradl. Respectfully submitted by Aiden Carney, by Tim Bradl. All right, Commonwealth versus Aiden Carney. This case is assigned to Judge Belizos. Defendant Aidan Carney's motion to stay further review by the taint team pending imminent enactment of the Massachusetts Journalist Shield Law, which would prohibit such a search. Now comes the defendant Aidan Carney by and through counsel and respectfully moves for a protective order pursuant to Mass. R. Crim P. 14 and the inherent authority of the court, staying any further review, examination, segregation, or dissemination of materials seized from Mr. Carney by any government taint team. As grounds, a bill shielding such searches, Amendment 17 is before the Joint Legislative Conference Committee with passage imminent. The Massachusetts Journalist Shield legislation, passed in veto-proof fashion, there it is, unanimously by the Massachusetts Senate with a cognate government transparency provision passed previously by the Massachusetts House, is presently in joint conference committee. In further support thereof, defendant states as follows. I'll go to page 2. All right, so in further support thereof, defendant states as follows. Mr. Carney's investigative reporting and advocacy journalism is at the heart of the charges presently brought against him. In furtherance of the charges, the Massachusetts State Police arrested Mr. Carney at his child's bus stop, entered his home, and seized the tools of his trade, cell phones, laptops, and iPads. They now seek to search these devices and root through years of confidential sources. His case, the source protection law, too, is also something that's being worked on, where journalists have the right to sources. His case and these intrusions present issues at the intersection of the First Amendment, attorney-client privilege, and the sacred confidential relationship between journalists and their sources. This is a beautiful law. It needs to pass, by the way. This needs to pass. See document 41, defense motion to suppress case 23-313 for comprehensive background. The materials seized from Mr. Carney indisputably contain journalistic work product, source communications, unpublished investigative materials, editorial files, and confidential communications gathered during investigative reporting. Basically, in short, seizing Aidan's materials here and having access to them is almost like the team you're about to play in the Super Bowl having access to your entire playbook. The court appointed a taint team to review Mr. Carney's electronic devices and segregate attorney-client privilege materials. The devices contain attorney-client materials that predate this case on other matters and involve other attorneys aside from undersigned counsels. The court did not protect or address confidential journalist sources, leaving them fair game for review by police. Presently before the court is the Commonwealth's request for carte blanche, I would say that wrong, assistance from court blanc assistance from the police to allow the taint team to crack Mr. Carney's devices to the fullest possible extent, many of which would only contain source material that predates the facts underlying the present charges. The request contravenes Judge Krupp's December 27, 2024 order prohibiting contact between police and the taint team members. See order Krupp here. Boom, boom, boom. The Commonwealth is attempting to engineer the search for maximum possible intrusion just before the legislator slams the door shut. These sources are at imminent risk of exposure in direct contravention of this pending legislation and through means prohibited by Judge Krupp. Furthermore, the defense specifically requested consideration of journalistic source material for inclusion in the taint team protection. See document number 67, case 23-313, with district court taint team motion attached with affidavit of Aidan Carney as exhibit, attesting to the presence of journalist source materials in devices. Commonwealth opposition is document 74, which was completely contravened by journalist shield law. The defendant's motion to include journalistic source material under taint team protection was denied via docket ruling from Judge Doolin, case cited. Obviously, there are changed circumstances. The legislator's recent action reflects a strong public policy determination that journalists should not be compelled to disclose unpublished materials or confidential source information except under extraordinarily limited circumstances. This search would be illegal under the Journalist Shield Law. See Endnote I, under Amendment 17, the party seeking such confidential source identity or information must establish by a clear and convincing evidence that such information, identity, or information is number one, material and relevant, or number two, critical or necessary to the maintenance of a party's claim, defense or proof of an issue highly material thereto. Or number three, not notable, not obtainable from any alternative source. And four, there is an overriding public interest in the disclosure. None of these protections have been effectuated in the instant case, and there is no scenario where such hurdles could be overcome by clear and convincing evidence. Accordingly, the importance of protecting a journalist's confidential sources, the legislators clearly expressed veto-proof intentions, and due process fundamental fairness considerations strongly favor preserving the status quo until those prosecutions can be fully submitted through the democratic process. If review by the taint team continues before the court evaluates the pending, this is a big part here, before the court evaluates the pending journalistic shield protections, the First Amendment rights at issue could effectively become meaningless. Unlike ordinary or discovery, rewind, unlike ordinary discovery disputes, the disclosure of confidential source information cannot later be undone. Once government personnel know the identity of confidential sources, review unpublished reporting, or examine investigative files, the confidentiality the legislators sought to protect has already been destroyed. Accordingly, maintaining the status quo is the only remedy capable of preserving the court's ability to meaningfully apply the forthcoming protections. Granting a temporary stay causes little or no prejudice to the Commonwealth. The seized materials are already secured. No evidence will be lost. Conversely, denial of a stay risks permanent destruction of statutory and constitutional protections designed to protect investigative journalism and confidential sources. The balance of harms overwhelmingly favors preserving the materials until the court determines whether new law will shortly govern this case. There is only a substantial public interest in protecting investigative journalism and preserving the free flow of confidential information concerning matters of public corruption and concern. The legislators' eminent adoption of passage of comprehensive journalist shield protections reflect a clear determination that these interests warrant heightened legal protection. Maintaining the status quo while the court evaluates the scope of those protective advances not hinders the public interest. Conclusion. For all of the foregoing reasons, defendant respectfully requests that this honorable court, number one, stay all review, examination, segregation, indexing, copying, dissemination, or analysis of the seized materials by any government, taint team, or filter team. Two, prohibit any additional review of the seized journalistic materials pending further order of the court. Number three, preserve all seized materials in their current condition without further examination. Number four, shield the status conference in approximately 45 to 60 days to assess the status of implementation of the Massachusetts Journalist Shield legislation so that the parties may address its applicability to the seized materials. Number five, and finally number five, grant such further relief. That's it for that. All right, we'll go to number two. Carte blanche rhymes with dart launch. Yeah, carte blanche. Shark launch. Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the other one here. That's part number one. Let's go to part number two. Let's see what he's got. Oh, this is just extra stuff here. Okay, this is just afterward. Extra materials. Okay. Affidavit of counsel. This is just a continuation. All right, it's just all kind of extra additional materials. So it's not really stuff that's needed to discuss then. Okay, good. We are good. All right, well, that's it then, folks. We're done. 2-hour show, went 3 hours. Let's take a look at our poll once more. Lindsay, Clancy, what do you think the verdict's going to be? 2% or one vote says guilty. Not guilty is 20 people voted. That's 39%. And then a hung jury, 30 people. So 50 people think not guilty or a hung jury. Only one person said guilty. So 59% hung jury, 39% not guilty, 2% guilty. That's 30 votes for hung jury, 20 votes for not guilty, and 1 vote for guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to Mazda Media today. I'm going to be watching the Patriots tonight. That much is for sure. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles later tonight. Looking forward to that game. Drake May and the starters should be out there for at least a couple repetitions tonight. and I'm looking forward to them. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate you tuning into the show. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and thank you guys so much for tuning into my show today. Please have a great Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Oh, by the way, I may or may not be live tomorrow. I might be doing Sean Paul Reyes and Fahey tomorrow. Pondering it. I'll let you guys know. I'll make an announcement on X if I end up doing a show. You can always check the channel, and you'll see that there'll be a video scheduled for probably 12 o'clock tomorrow if I decide to do it. We shall see. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much. Someone says, go Eagles. Go Eagles, they say. We got some Philly fans in the house. We sent Jaylen Brown to you guys in the Sixers, and you guys let us get AJ. So we traded Browns between our NBA and NFL teams. So, all right, guys, have a good one. Take care. And we'll probably be back next Sunday. It's looking like for a KY Maverick, Kelsey Fitzsimmons fundraiser, about 6 o'clock potentially on next Sunday. We will see. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great night. Take care. And all right.